everybody. Help with some certain things to help get elected. So Richmond brings them out to the special I know it's just like a total. It's like not even. It's like disassociating from like a part of your consciousness and like redeveloping like a whole new personality within your mind. It's like a split of mind. Yeah. 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 And I feel like how we describe it, like we describe it as like or yeah, but
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll call the February 5th Select Board meeting to order. Before we accept the agenda, we are going to, well, actually we'll accept the agenda, but we have one change under public hearings. I'm going to just open the public hearing now and ask for a motion to extend it to April 1st.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. So we do not have an HDC appeal this evening, which is the last item currently on the agenda. No other changes that I'm aware of. Announcements?
This meeting is being audio and video recorded, and we have an announcement that came in that's not on the agenda, but it will be for the next couple of weeks. During the month of February, seniors ride for free every Wednesday on the Wave. All routes. You can download the Where's My Bus app at nrta.transloc.com. All of this is on the NRTA website. So that's basically the announcement. Seniors ride for free every Wednesday in February.
This is the public comment portion of our agenda for anything that's not otherwise on our agenda.
Hi, Steve Bender, 73 Orange Street. I bet you missed me. I've been here a few weeks. I have some brilliantly good news, and that is that oil-absorbing pillows have been put in all the catch basins at the First Winthrop property in front of the Stop and Shop downtown. And, you know, it's totally brilliant. It only took 3 years and a half to, anyway.
Well, thank
I
you
was
for,
gonna say,
thank
don't
you
undo
for
the good-
announcing that.
It's brilliant.
The good news is the good news.
And now I'm gonna take away the brilliance a little bit.
I was going to say thank you for your brevity.
What about the 100 approximately town catch basins that are scrupulously filthy? When are we gonna? I mean, those oil absorbing pillows should be put in the town catch basins before all the automobiles arrive in the summer. I mean, that's what they're for. Otherwise, it all goes into the harbor. Okay, enough on that subject.
We'll get back to you.
You have a new purpose.
I have, excuse me?
You have a new purpose. You can divert.
Okay. I just want to, I mentioned this to Matt Fee earlier. I have a strong suspicion that it is contrary to state law to not have a policy whereby the health officer is informed when the exterior of a building is going to be sanded. That should be looked into. There's no town council here, so we'll have to wait.
And just so you know, Steve, I've already asked Libby and Erica, and when I get an answer, I'll get back to you with it.
And of course, I just want to hit on one more thing. I believe it's extremely poor government not to have the town council here at meetings. There are numerous things coming up every selectmen's meeting which are rife with legal difficulties. And there's nobody here who can really address them. There are no lawyers here. We need the town council. I never heard, I've been here 50 years. This is the first series of years that there's no town council. When did he stop coming here? Did somebody tell me?
I don't think that's correct.
Judy?
No. Incorrect.
Judy?
That is an incorrect statement, that he has not been here every meeting for 50 years.
Oh, he's been here once in a while, I know.
Yeah, once in a while, right.
Yes, but he should be here every meeting is what I'm saying. Okay, I thank you.
Thank you.
If he isn't here, how can you conduct a meeting? You go blah, blah, blah. You need a legal advice.
I don't believe that there's any new business. Are there any other public comments? Okay, hearing none. I don't know of any new business. Approval of minutes from September 11th.
So moved.
Oh, I actually have, I'm sorry, wait a minute. I did have one edit that I forgot to give to Erica. It was in our discussion about the island home. There was about the 45 beds and the licensing, where it should have said, it was contradictory what it said, what I said. Do you want to email? I can just email it to you if that's okay. Oh, wait a minute. It's, sorry. Yeah, I'll have to get back to you when I find it.
Do you want to approve it, or do you want to wait till? Do you want to approve with your change?
Wait, I've got it. It's on page 4. It said, I explained the facility is licensed for 45 beds and cannot be more than that with a comprehensive process through the State Department of Public Health. It should have been without. Yes, that was it. If you guys don't mind that change. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries
I second.
unanimously.
Just did, yeah.
Approval of Treasury warrants.
Move approval?
I think there's Treasury, yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
Treasury.
Yep, yes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Pending contracts. I think that there were some questions on definitely one of them.
Yes, I wanted to bring a couple of things to your attention. First off, there are 2 new contracts that came in after the pending contracts was issued in the agenda. I just noticed a tiny typo. See if anybody else can find it. There's a professional service agreement, 2 professional services agreement in connection with our island home with the same contractor, Eisenstein, Flaherty and Associates. The first is for $5,000. This is a group that we have, that we would like to contract with for assistance with the annual Department of Public Health survey of our island home. We are well within the window of that survey, and they are going to come tomorrow and go through the facility and help set out any issues that might arise during the survey. Secondly, we would like to contract with them for interim administrator services. The information is listed there. The fee is $182,000 per year. That's $3,500 a week. And this is actually something that we talked about years ago as to when we were having trouble hiring an administrator, as to whether or not there might be a firm out there that provides services, a nursing home administrator services. And now I finally found one. So luckily, we have on staff a licensed nursing home administrator, Rachel Day, and she is continuing to be the licensed administrator for now. And this group, though, will provide the services going forward for now until we have determined as to a permanent solution.
When will that new director start?
Contract approval by you
Okay.
all tonight, tomorrow.
Oh, that fast?
Yes.
Okay. Good.
Any questions about that? Okay. The other item I wanted to bring to your attention is on the second page. It is it's actually not really a professional services agreement, but it's listed that way for Marine Department, Sconset Beach Preservation Fund, Inc. This is a bid for the sale of sand, and I wanted to go through some things. We received some inquiry. I received some inquiry today from citizens. There are approximately 34 questions and comments. I've done my best to try to address them, and if you would like me to go through them, I can try to get through it. There are some things I didn't have time to quite get to, but hopefully I did my best. Number one, there's a kind of a comment in the memo we received. In accordance with the coastal management plan, the intention of the town was to create a sand bank of dredged material from Pulpus Harbor. Actually, before I get into this, why don't I just explain a little bit about what is on here? The town dredged Pulpus Harbor about a year ago, and it is a project that was in the works for several years prior to that. And there had been some discussion at the time about what will we do with the dredge spoils. And early on, when the project was being planned, the plan was that the spoils would be spread out to adjacent properties in the general area for beach protection purposes. However, one of the requirements with Chapter 91 licensing is that easements be provided for public access if that is going to be done. And those neighboring property owners were not willing to grant the easements to the town. So then there was some discussion about this sandbank idea, and could we have, kind of a big pile of sand somewhere or in various locations around the island for coastal resiliency purposes, erosion control, beach nourishment, maybe there was some town use, things of that nature. And we had to identify a place, though, to put those spoils pretty quickly in order to get the project done. And the project already was delayed because we did not have a sufficient location immediately available. So it took some time to find it. Public Works was consulted, and early on there was an area that was potentially set aside for the spoils. And in the intervening time between the time that was set aside and the project actually began, that space was taken up by other operations. We did have an open space at the town-owned property on Industry Road where there has been a planned Marine Department layup building for boat repair and storage for some time now. And since the building had not yet been started or the project constructed, or we did not even yet have funding for that, it was determined that since we have to put the sand somewhere, it would be put there. After further discussion with Public Works, it was determined that they did not really have a municipal use for the sand. It would have to be screened. It would have to be transported to Public Works yard. And we also didn't have any particular project identified for beach nourishment or erosion control purposes or anything like that. And again, in the intervening time between the time the project was actually planned and started, we started talking about coastal resiliency plans. We more recently established the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee, and I guess it was kind of internally discussed, and not even all that much discussed since there was no identified projects or use, that until we had a dredge plan, which is yet another kind of companion project, I guess I would call it, to the Coastal Resiliency Plan, until we have that, there's not a good use for the sand. It also requires permitting and testing. The grain size has to be appropriate for, wherever you're going to put it. And again, since there was no identified project, it didn't have anywhere to go, and it now needs to be moved from the current site so that the layup building project can begin. So the project was put out to bid. And there were, I'll get into this in my answers to some of these questions, but there were 4 bidders. The bids ranged from, it's 9,500 cubic yards of sand. It has not been screened, and it has been there again for approximately a year. The bids ranged from $45,000 to $240,100. That was the high bid. This is an invitation for bid under Chapter 40B, Mass Procurement Law. A bid under this provision goes to the highest bidder. So regardless of whether bidders are in litigation with the town or have some kind of an issue with the town, that is not a reason to cancel the bid, and we would be open to legal challenge if we canceled it for that reason. There may be a way to cancel it entirely if that's what the board wanted to do, but we still need to put this sand somewhere and deal with it. And I guess our feeling was this is revenue coming into the town. It offsets about perhaps half of the estimated cost of the Marine Department layup building, which is estimated at about $450,000-ish. So there was that thinking as well.
How much was the dredging? How much did that cost?
That is answered in some of my questions, but
Okay.
the low bid for that project was $1.375225
Million?
million.
Yep, okay, so $1.3 million to dredge it.
Yep.
Okay.
I think that's an overview. And if you guys have questions about the overview, I'd be happy to try to answer them. Okay, then, as far as the questions and comments that came in go, the first one was, again, the intention of the town was to create a sandbank of dredged material from Pulpus Harbor. The coastal management plan is 134 pages long. I did not have a chance to go through it in its entirety. I asked the natural resources director to try to take a look at that. We didn't immediately see that there was a specific policy in the CMP as to adopting a sandbank as part of an overall island-wide dredge plan or strategy. That I don't think it's in there as an adopted public policy. It may be mentioned in there, and there certainly has been discussion about it. But to the best of my knowledge, it wasn't an adopted public policy. Number two, there is a comment in the letter that we received that the dredge material was used at 3 specific areas for beach nourishment. Nantucket, an area in Nantucket at the end of Nantucket Road, at the end of Hummock Pond Road, and an area in Quays. We do not believe any dredged materials were used in any of those projects because Pulpus Harbor is the most recent dredging project we've done, and there would not have been any dredged material at the time these particular projects were done, which was about 3 years ago. We've done a recent smaller job at the town pier with some dredging. That was about 1,000 cubic yards, and that material went to the landfill. I'm just going to try to attempt to read the questions and to answer them. Is the proposal to sell dredged materials to private parties for private projects a departure from the established public policy of creating a sandbank? Again, there is no established public policy of creating a sandbank. Number 4, how can any town official state that there is no municipal need for dredged material for resiliency purposes when a storm could come at any time and create such a need? I don't think any town official has stated that there is no municipal need for dredged material in resiliency purposes. The DPW director has indicated that there's no municipal use for this particular sand for a variety of reasons, including the need to screen it, transport it, and there's no currently available space at DPW for it, nor is there a current project or area that the town has identified for it. 5, wasn't the intent to be prepared for such a happening by having material available in a sandbank? We do not believe so. We believe that the yet-to-be-completed dredge plan and now the ongoing coastal resiliency plan process would identify where nourishment or other use of dredged sand could potentially be used, and then it would have to be permitted by Concom and potentially DEP or the Army Corps of Engineers. 6, what does the purchaser intend to do with the dredged material? The town does not ask bidders what it intends to do with surplus property that the town is selling. 7, has the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee reviewed this proposal? No. 8, what is the purchase price per cubic yard of the dredged material? $25.27. $25.27 per cubic yard. Number 9, what was the cost per cubic yard to the town to permit, dredge, and store this material? Based on the low bid price, which I just mentioned, for $1,375,225, that would be $144.76 per cubic yard. Number 10, how does this compare with the market rate both on and off the island? We have not researched the market rate for dredged unscreened sand, either on or off the island. However, the town has a current bid with a group called Cape Cod Aggregates for screened mason sand used for various DPW purposes, and that is $16 per ton. I have not converted that to cubic yards. We could if needed. Actually, Rob probably has, but I didn't do that. 11.
And before you go, Libby, and I've heard it's about $40. I don't know if that's true or not, but people have told me it's about 40. I'm getting a thumbs up.
We'd probably want to document that.
Yeah, screened is about 40, I've heard.
But it's unscreened.
Again, we probably would want to document
that?
that.
It's unscreened.
No, I understand. Yeah.
Was this sand put out to bid? Yes. 12. If yes, what were the other bids and who were the other bidders? As I said, there were 4 bidders in total. SBPF bid $240,100. Strang LLC bid $101,800. P&M Reese Trucking bid $101,100. And Toscana bid $45,000. 13. How did this transaction come about? I think I tried to talk about this a bit. The current storage location of 3 Shadbush Road, I might have called it Industry Road before, it's actually 3 Shadbush, was the only town-owned space available to temporarily store the sand until it was dewatered, dried out. Originally, it was planned for the DPW yard, but again, there was insufficient space there, not enough room. In order to move the project forward, we had to find an immediate storage location. The space in where the sand is now was identified and now needs to be cleared to make room for the marine project. Is the town in the business of selling dredged material to private entities? I'm not quite sure that a one-time selling of sand can be considered being in the business of selling dredged material, so I would say no, we are not in that business. However, a number of factors led to this sand being determined surplus and not needed for town operations, including the storage location, storage requirements, testing, use requirements, lack of required easements provided by the property owners near the dredging project. Decades ago, when the town had dredging projects to undertake, the permit requirements were much less stringent, the use was much less restricted, space was more readily available, and the spoils could more readily be placed near the dredged areas without the restrictions that are in place today. 15, was the town approached by potential purchasers? I have not had a chance to ask every staff person in the town who might have had something to do with this project, but my belief is that the answer is no. 16. Has any consideration been given to the appropriateness of selling dredged material to an entity that has current enforcement issues, including the use of uncleaned and possibly contaminated fill in violation of a Concom permit on a town-owned beach? The sale of the sand was done pursuant to General Law, Chapter 30B. The motivations or prior legal situations of the bidders are not an appropriate determining factor as to whether or not to award a bid. If the bidder presents a responsive and legal bid, then what is required, that is what is required under state procurement law. Any sand used by SBPF for its project is subject to Concom review and approval. 17. Has any consideration been given to the appropriateness of doing business with an entity that may be in litigation with the town over the Concom's decision to deny permitting for the very hard structure for which mitigation material might be intended? Again, I guess I would say the same answer as the prior. Using the SBPF appeal of the Concom order of conditions as a reason to reject the bid would be tenuous legally. 18. How long ago was this material dredged from Public Harbor? The materials were the dredge materials were removed between November 1st, 2018 and January 15th, 2019. Was it done under the coordination of Mr. Franzuto? No. Why is this material called dewatered sand? That is a term used to describe dredge sand that is wet and then is allowed to sit and have the water drain from it. What does that mean? Dewatered sand. I think hopefully I just answered that. 22. How was it dewatered? Initially, it was right after being removed from the water, it was dewatered on the barge and then transported to the current site by truck where it sat dewatering further, and it's been sitting out in the open for a year, finishing off, I guess. Has a sand analysis of the dredged material been conducted? Tests were required prior to the dredging project commencing. I did not have time to research if testing has occurred since then, but I could find that out subsequent to this. Has the material been found to be beach compatible? Again, I did not have time to research that, but that would be, if used for this particular project, that would be subject to Concom review and approval. Does it meet the DEP guidelines for beach nourishment? And does it meet the Concom and DEP definition of clean fill? And is it free from contaminants, both chemical and biological? All of that I did not have time to research. However, again, it would all be subject to Concom requirements as to testing. What is the total amount of material dredged from Pulpus Harbor? 9,500 cubic yards. Where is it stored? Is it stored at the town-owned property at 3 Shadbush Road? What percentage of the available dewatered sand from the Pulpus Harbor dredging project does this purchase of 9,500 cubic yards represent? All of it. Is there any additional dredged material from other locations also being stored either at this site or at other sites? No, not from the Pulpus project. As I mentioned, approximately 1,000 cubic yards from a small dredging project in connection with the town pier renovation was dredged very recently, and that was removed to the landfill. Does the town presently have a need for this material? I am advised no. Will it need sand in the future? Possibly. How is the town's sand need determined? Again, the dredge plan and the coastal resiliency plan should help inform us as to the determination of the needs for town sand. I think that's it. Again, I tried to get through it quickly. I don't know if there are things I could answer further or not, but I might need a little more time if need be.
I know that there were questions from a few people in the audience, and you're welcome to come up if those didn't answer them.
Deanne Atherton, the Coastal Conservancy, and we're the ones who sent the memorandum and the questions. Yesterday, when we became aware of this proposed contract, and we thank the town manager for answering some of the questions. What we did in the memorandum was respectfully request that you delay action on this particular agreement, even for a week, so that we could have a public discussion of it. The public has not seen this memorandum. They don't know about this. The whole issue of sand and the need for sand is a critical one. I don't know if you saw the footnote on page 2 of the memorandum, but we went through the coastal management plan, which, as you recall, was divided into sections of the island. And for each section, there were recommendations of possible resiliency strategies for town-owned property. And there are about 8 of them listed, from the end of Hummock Pond Road, West Myacomet, East Myacomet, Tom Nevers, whatever. It seems to us, well, I'm engaging in the conversation, and we're just saying we think this is an important discussion, and we unless there is a compelling reason, we're asking you to put this on the agenda for a public discussion when the public is informed of it.
Bill Greer, curmudgeon from Nantucket. I didn't realize that the memo and letter was coming here, but they asked a lot of the questions that I was going to ask anyhow, so I thank them for that. Since 2013 or so, when Dave Franzuta was here, we had multiple meetings and presentations by that department. And Deanne referred to the CMP that was the result of all of that. And in those multiple presentations, we were told or led to believe, we believe it's fact, and whether it was ever enacted, I guess, now is the question. But we were told there was 2 sand storage sites that had to be permitted. One was at the landfill, and the other was at old New North Shore Road and New Shore Road, which is now called Shadbush. And this all came about because of the possibility of losing Nantucket Road back to Ames Avenue. And it morphed into a whole discussion about the taking of land to the east of Ames, which is the old Millie's, Nantucket Millie's property, and how some of that is coming back to the town, I think, in another year or two. So the town owns a swath all the way down to the creek. And this all was part of the discussion about maintaining access to Smith Point over Ames Avenue. And so Dave sort of morphed that conversation and his beach nourishment plan. And so the 3 sites that were actually done, and I don't know where the sand came from, but Nantucket, Quays, and Hummock Pond Road, those areas were done. And in that document that town manager was talking about, I didn't want to call you by your first name, but the town manager was trying to be respectful. It identified that these sites needed to be done, and the recommendation was to keep beach nourishment going as needed, with Concom approval naturally if need be. But not only those sites, but a host of others from Smith Point, Sheep Pond Road, West Maya Comet, East Maya Comet, South Shore Road, Sewer Beds, Western Ave, Surfside Road, Newtanham Road, Tom Nevers, Codfish Park, Hawks Hollow, Sackatcher Pond, and Squam Road. And then last night at a presentation on an anaerobic digester feasibility study, we learned that the wastewater treatment plant area has lost several feet of beach as part of their operation. So there clearly is identified spots as far back as 2013 to 2014 of town-maintained properties. So it sort of disturbs me to hear that we don't have those formally identified when, as far as the citizens at those meetings are concerned, it was identified in 2013. So I would hope that you folks rally the troops here and get this back going again, because it's disappointing to hear that we don't have a plan and that we're not enacting it, one that we thought was already underway. Thank you.
What does everybody want to do? I think we will need a legal opinion if there's intention of canceling this bid.
I talked to John today about this. If you're intending to cancel it, the only option is to reject the entire bid. But John and I talked about it, and we don't see a path to actually be able to rebid this again if we reject it. So
Right.
we did talk about it, and that was what the conclusion that both him and I came to for that. So
And
mean, I think that
the
would be the
reason for
board
not being able to
decision.
rebid it?
Because we'd have to modify it somehow to do, and we don't see a path that would work to modify it in a way that would not create additional potential problems for the town.
So we could cancel it if we wanted to keep the sand for our own
Yeah.
If you wanted to
purposes.
keep the sand for the town, we could reject the entire bid. We believe that we would have, that's in the bid specs of the IFB, but we don't believe there's a path to rebid it if we were to do that.
Okay.
Well, I don't know why for me, it's either a question of, are we keeping the sand and how are we doing that because it needs to move? Or are we accepting the high bid?
Okay.
Because, one second. And so I lost my thought.
Good evening. My name is Rick Atherton. Just sort of from a little different perspective, and certainly there are a lot of questions that were answered tonight. It seemed to me the thrust of the questions were just, quite honestly, answer them and move on. And I think what's disappointing to me a little bit, I think a number of people are aware of the sand issue. Local neighborhoods are aware of the need for nourishment of certain locations. And I think the town would have been better served to recognize those as public policy issues and said, let's discuss this openly, talk about what we intend to do and why, and what the solutions might be. There's not only one solution, there might be others. But that's not what happened. Best I can tell, it just appears here because we want to build the building soon or whatever we're going to do out on Shadbush Road. And that's the part that's disappointing to me. I think we would have all been better off to recognize those issues up front and find a way to openly deal with them before it's like take it or leave it tonight and you're under pressure and you can't rebid or whatever. There are lots of options that might have been discussed previously. Thank you.
Do you remember what you were going to say?
Go ahead.
I'm fine moving it a week or two if Brian says there's not a procurement issue. If we're going to keep it, there's all kinds of things I've been writing down. How do we screen it? Do we have to third party it out? Where does it go? All the other things, like that, kind of some of the questions. Where could we use it? Mr. Greeter kind of said there's already places, but how do we make the sand usable? Do we have to bring somebody in? What's that kind of cost? All those kind of things I'd want to know if we're going to cancel this contract. You know, it's not enough for me to cancel it. I think there should be a little bit of discussion.
I believe that Jeff did say that this would have to be used on the eastern side of the island because of its grain size.
That is what I initially thought, but upon talking with him further, again, I was trying to get this done very quickly today.
Okay.
He said it would have to be tested further, and it maybe could be used in other places.
Okay.
It's
I just wanted
not
to
a
make sure I was
gigantic
clear.
amount of sand. And when we were talking about this, I guess our issue was we don't have a plan. And I don't think, which area are we going to pick? You can't just throw the sand down there. It's got to get permitted, and you need to have a plan. And it's not. I think the idea of the sand bank was there would be kind of this continuous supply of sand. This is a one-time supply. We don't have a dredge plan yet. We haven't done any more dredging. Hither Creek may be a next area for dredging, but we haven't even sought funding for that yet. So I think we were just, kind of going along with the idea that this was not something we could readily use right now.
So, Madam Chair, I think that those are some of the questions, things that Libby said. If it's not a lot of sand, then we should be able to find somewhere to put it. If it's not a lot, like I'm picturing it's twice the size of this room, but maybe it's not that big.
It's not twice the size of this room, no.
That's what's in my head. I could be way off for cubic volume. I'm not very good at that. I have a ton of questions, so I don't mind finding that out, but I'm not leaning towards canceling it. I think we should talk about it more.
Would you guys like to wait on this? till next week? Is that okay? Timeline?
I mean, we
wise?
can wait. I'm not sure it's going to change much, but I think the important thing is how do I say it, is sand is going to become, it is an important issue now, and it's going to become even more so of an issue. And I think in the future, it should be put somewhere where it doesn't have to be moved, or we should have an idea where to move this to, that so it can be used in various other projects. I think, I just don't, we talk about it a lot, especially in regards to SBPF and how much sand is, how much is going out there, and where is it going to come from, and what are we going to do in the future? And I think we need to start being a little more proactive. And I'm a little disappointed we didn't, that it just sort of came up on us.
Yeah,
But I
it
also
did.
question whether, if this were for, pick a couple places, this were for UMass Field Station or, Sankaty Beach Club, I question whether it would be quite the uproar we have. So I think there's two things going on, and I'm not, but I do think we have to do better with figuring out long-term, where's the sand coming from, where are we storing it? Can we get a ongoing license for these issues? Because, from a resiliency standpoint, it's gonna be pretty constant. And if it takes 6 months to apply to fix something, or everything has to only be emergency, I just think we have to find a way to get ahead of it. Hopefully a resiliency plan or a sand plan will happen, in sort of my lifetime, but we'll see,
Brian, were you going to say, if we wait a week or two, how does that affect the
I don't,
bid?
I wouldn't be of the opinion that waiting a week or two would create a problem. Well, you thought through it.
Matt, are you saying do you want to go ahead and
I'm
take a vote?
fine either way. If we want to wait a week, I'm not sure it's going to change much. Maybe it will. Maybe between now and then we'll learn something.
I think there might be some facts, some things that we might learn. And if we do approve it, at least we've had a little more time, and the public's had a little more time to think through it, and Jeff Carlson's had some time to weigh in on some things. So it's at least a little more of an informed decision if we do go forward with it, or if we go the other way, at least.
I'm okay with waiting a week.
Okay, does somebody want to make a motion to approve all of the contracts except for that one, and we'll put that on next week?
I don't, because I want to talk about two others, but.
I was gonna say there's a couple others.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, let's move on to talk about them, and then we'll
Okay.
go to the motion.
Well, can we do this? Let's just vote to move this for a week, and then, is that fair?
Fine.
I motion we move this to next week.
Second.
All right, so we got one done.
Could you,
Either way, I'm happy to take questions from the public, so however it's appropriate to structure the agenda. It's not going to be a public hearing.
Right. Yeah, but you're going to take comments, so I would say it doesn't matter.
and could I, specifically, what is the additional information that you'd want?
I think we could just refine the answers to those questions and circulate them to the people who've been here tonight asking questions. And then I think,
laying out if we kept the sand,
Yeah,
what would that
what
plan
would we
look
do?
like? What would the cost look like?
How do we clean the sand? Where does it go?
yeah,
We know we could use it down the road sometime, but all the things.
what's our alternate plan for holding it?
Right.
Right. Is that fair? Sure. Okay. Did somebody second?
Jason seconded.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, questions on the other contracts?
We received a letter today from Historic Commission, and it was, they've got a policy now on roundabouts with Nantucket in mind, and they highlighted, and again, I don't like when things come late like that, and I complain about
Yeah,
it, so.
you're jumping ahead because I haven't read that yet.
I know, so we received it.
I haven't read it either.
Okay, so I guess the question is, they sent it this afternoon, and there are two, in this are two contracts for design of Old South Road and Fairgrounds, and what was the other one?
One above it.
Yeah, the one above it. Oh, yeah, it's Four Corners roundabouts. The Historic Commission is recommending mini roundabouts, as much as possible. So I guess the question is, are these mini roundabouts, Mike, that we're designing? For the two that we're bidding tonight?
Yes, there were actually 3 requests to extend a deadline so we can wrap up what you had approved, not this past summer, but the summer before, to at least complete 25% preliminary designs, and that's a good deliverable to have. It's what you had designed to executed a contract for, and a lot of public money's been spent on that design work for survey and design services. And you did approve the use of a modern roundabout, and we did evaluate mini roundabouts at the Four Corners intersection. We actually tested a mini roundabout at the Fairgrounds Old South Road intersection. That's I don't think we need to describe that at all, but I thought that worked very well. However, it was a larger circle that was envisioned for that intersection. The recommendation for the Four Corners intersection was the larger modern roundabout. Again, the size of the Sparks Avenue roundabout, that identical configuration. And there was a request to extend the deadline on the Bartlett Surf side, but I think that was removed from this list.
All right, so the Four Corners as it stands, what we're bidding on tonight, just so we're clear, is the Four Corners, we're designing a roundabout, like a larger roundabout.
Similar to the Sparks
Right.
Roundabout.
And the Fairgrounds in Old South is a mini roundabout like we tested?
That's the modern, that's again, identical to the Sparks Avenue location. That's a modern roundabout, not a mini roundabout. We did test the mini roundabout, but it was with the full understanding that that was an undersized from what was
That was the
preferred
plywood
alternative.
stuff we had this past spring. Which I thought went pretty well. And it's a lot cheaper. It's a lot cheaper to put in, to do. It's more in keeping with sort of the built island, built environment. And so I just want to make sure that we're on the,
Sure, and we have had these discussions in other arenas. There are volumes of traffic that mini roundabout just doesn't function as well at a certain point, and that's why the larger configuration was recommended. And you did support the preferred alternative of a modern roundabout to handle those flows of traffic sufficiently.
I like mini roundabouts. I like the idea, but in some places, I think the truckers, the large truck drivers, had a hard time with. Well, it wasn't. It was just plywood, but they had a hard time with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think in these two locations, I'm comfortable with them being proposed in a similar manner to the Sparks. I wouldn't be comfortable with the main rotary size, but I've also get a lot of comments in regard to the safety of having the crosswalks be more substantial with more substantial center pieces in case you end up having to stop in the middle as a pedestrian. So,
and that was absolutely a comment that was received during conceptual design a couple of years ago, and there was a robust island that was designed in for those. I think the narrowest section was 6 feet, so that you could actually queue a bicycle in that refuge island and have that be a comfortable situation for anybody who's trying to cross that road.
So, Mike, if someone's watching this, and they're like, "Wait, we shot that roundabout down. Why are we spending money designing it?" It's not that simple, but it looks like that from the public standpoint.
Yeah.
Right. I think you opened with that, right? We voted this in years ago.
Design money was approved by town meeting in the situation for the Fairgrounds Old South Road intersection. Town meeting did appropriate design funds, $150,000 for that. Don't quite have the deliverable of the 25% preliminary design that you all approved being advanced from conceptual. So that did pass. Unfortunately, that construction funding was packaged with other improvements, and those, as you know, was not supported.
Right.
By a vote, but that was, I believe that was the only defeat of any type of roundabout project. I don't believe the Four Corners was affected by that.
Okay.
Yeah, a couple of things. I think sometimes what happens is the psychology of previous investment. Well, we voted and we've invested it, so then we just move forward, even when we learn that something could be acceptable and better for the island. And so I think I'm not so sure that we need I'm pretty sure we don't need the larger issues in certain places, and I don't think they're in keeping. And I think that the safety issue is in my mind, is somewhat of red herring because the smaller ones are easier to cross. You know, so I know that you've got the shed in, the pedestrian shed in the middle, but then you're crossing two different levels of traffic, whereas the smaller one, you're looking at one level and going through. I was just in Colorado, and coming off their highway, they've got mini roundabouts. You know, they have one with a little entrance so you can keep driving straight down the highway, but you've got another small spot, but they're not very big. And they're smaller than what we have here in the Mid-Island. And so I think that we should, and they only have two in the entire town, and in the summer, they get a lot busier than we do for those months. The winter, they're not as busy. But I just feel like, you know, we should be sort of, where the buck stops here, and sometimes, you know, it's a runaway train when it gets to us, and what do we do? But I just, you know, again, I would like to maybe put a little more time into these to,
Well,
myself, but.
again, we did go over conceptual designs, and this board did support proceeding to preliminary design 25%, and that's what the three agreements would finalize those agreements, but these two that are on the list here would actually finish that product, so you'd at least have those design plans and a nice product if you wanted to advance these in the future.
Yeah, we're not currently advancing the Bartlett Road.
You have a design agreement for that as it was previously approved. Just the expiration date on that needed to be extended. If there's not a willingness to do that any longer, then I'm sure we can inform the consultant that and see where they are in design so we can actually get a product, because there was a significant amount of money spent on that. So, and we are towards the end of design.
Do you want to take a motion on just those two?
Yeah, well, I'd like to pull those out until next week so you guys have a chance to read
Let's take
the
a motion.
information.
Let's take a motion on that. 'cause
I'll make a motion to that effect.
Okay.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed
Opposed?
to pulling it out till next week?
Yeah, I don't think we need to pull it out.
I'm okay to pull it out till next week.
Okay.
I'd like to read the email from the Historical Commission.
So, I'm sorry, what was the vote? Was it 3-1?
Yeah, we wanted to wait till next week on it.
But all of these are coming back next week. What about the rest?
Move
Motion.
approval?
All those in all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, next consent items. We have a gift acceptance from Department of Public Works.
Motion to accept and send a letter of thanks.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. That's for Moby the Whale. Real estate items, request for approval and execution of subordination agreement for 7 Monahansa Road.
Ken Bogran, Real Estate Specialist. This should be fairly straightforward. In 2005, Nantucket received a Small Cities Community Development Grant for funding the Housing Rehabilitation Program. And what happened was the amount that was granted, and in this case, $18,300, was covered by a 15-year, 0% interest rate mortgage that was forgiven at 1/15 each year as long as the person or their family continued to remain in the residence. And that is the case. And this mortgage expires in September of this year, so there's only one payment of no amount due. They are in the process of refinancing the property, and so the bank has requested that this mortgage be subordinated to the new first mortgage that they would be put on with respect to their financing. So there's no monetary difference with respect to the town. It's simply the fact that we're giving them the opportunity to refinance. And so we did this with a similar property about a year ago and approved that. And so it is my recommendation that the select board enter into the subordination agreement.
Move approval?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay, we are up to town manager's report. Jason, can you chair for a second?
Okay, so we are trying to work out what the best format is for a strategic planning update on a quarterly basis. And I guess we've been a little inconsistent because we're trying to land on the right one. So we've landed on this one for right now. And so as you know, you have in September recently adopted your strategic plan update. There are 5 focus areas. 4 of them have goals associated with them. I think I'm not going to go through every goal because I think you all know what they are. And I think since September, we have reviewed with you some status on some of these goals. So they're not all, these status reports are not all entirely new to you. So first off, we have our housing area. And different department heads are going to come in and review what the status is. So our housing director, Tucker Holland, is first, and he's going to take you through the status of the housing goals. And some of them you already know, because I think he recently did an update about the Affordable Housing Trust activities.
Thank you, Town Manager and Select Board. Yes, I just will relatively quickly go through the goals and where we stand on each of them. As you will recall, goal number 1 was to achieve safe harbor status in each of the next 3 years per the goal set for Nantucket by the state through Chapter 40B, and to maintain local control over our affordable housing. So as you are all aware, in July of 2019, we received a 2-year certification from DHCD of our housing production plan. This basically means we are in a 2-year safe harbor period, which will run until June 13th, 2021. The only thing that would interrupt that certification is if the Richmond rental apartments, which were a part of that certification, do not receive their COs within 18 months of when the building permits were pulled last summer. And it seems like they are well on track to come in before that 18-month date. But this period expires at the end, or excuse me, in the middle of June of 2021. And so the Neighborhood First Advisory Committee, in conjunction with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, has been very active in planning for the deployment of capital authorized at last year's town meeting to ensure that we are in position to go into a new period of safe harbor and not have any gap. One way that that might actually happen, aside from the Neighborhood First and CPC funds, is Tacoma Green could come online in terms of when those units would count at a point at which we would have no gap in our safe harbor again, and it would provide in and of itself a new 2-year period of safe harbor. So in summary, this goal we are in very good shape on. Housing goal number 2. To finalize a plan to address housing needs specifically for town employees, year-round and seasonal. We have gone through several different aspects related to this goal in terms of standardizing our license agreement for the limited number of town units that we have. We are exploring structures with town council. Having housing specifically for town employees, as you all know, is a challenging item with fair housing laws, as well as the anti-aid amendment within Massachusetts. So this is a bit of a nuanced subject, but we are making progress on this and continuing to refine ultimately what an appropriate strategy would be. For the seasonal side, we are presently bringing online an OPM for the development of seasonal employee housing here at the fairgrounds site, and we anticipate having costs and a program for that to discuss at fall special town meeting. So for housing goal number 3,
Before you leave number 2, so the board knows, I've sent some information on how Harvard runs its program to Tucker, and also, and they do all market. And so if we had a rental situation with 30 or 60 rental homes and 25% were proper, all the rest, even at market, could count in some manner. And so, and then some of the issues that we have with employees, that we could have a employee preference, but some of the other issues that we're worried about might fall away. So they may not fit in the 25% affordable at whatever level on those details, but some of the other things might fall away. And so and he's got that information and is sort of working on it.
Yeah, the universities get more latitude than municipalities, but
Right.
yes, it's a challenging puzzle, but we're making some progress on it. Housing goal number 3 is to determine in greater detail the need for housing at all affordability levels, ranging from 30% AMI to 200% AMI for the community at large. And the data platform has recently provided a report to the Affordable Housing Trust that gets at some of this demand. The trust has gone back to them with some clarifying questions, and we, at our meeting in 2 weeks on February 18th, should be getting further feedback from the data platform regarding this particular subject. And of course, we all know that the 2020 census is now underway, and we certainly would encourage everyone to fill out a form, be counted. It's extremely important for all kinds of reasons here on Nantucket. Housing goal number 4 is to identify incentives to encourage homeowners to use secondary dwelling as year-round rentals. This is a more recent goal of the board under the housing category, and the trust has just begun to take up this subject. So more at the next report.
Thank you. All right, transportation has 3 goals. The first, we're going to, I think the chief is going to take us through. This is the downtown parking management system. And again, this is something more that has been more recently discussed by you all. So I think we can probably get, some of this is not going to be totally new to you, but there's a bit of an update since we last talked about it. I know we had received our RFP responses, interviews have been held, and some of this other stuff on the slide. And then we wanted to take you through a little bit of the potential draft paid parking regulations, which you have a public hearing on March 4th. But if you had any issues or anything you want to discuss about that now, just in draft discussion format, that would be okay too.
Okay. As you know, the transportation goal 1 was to implement a parking management system in the downtown area primarily. And we put out an RFP back in December. The proposals, we got 2. They've been reviewed by the committee, which included myself, Janet Schulte, and Greg Tivnan and Jason Schreiber. And we reviewed the proposals, determined what, that they submitted proposals based on what we were asked for, the best we could determine. And we asked for demonstrations. They did that just a couple weeks ago. Both companies came with their equipment, showed us what they had, how it worked. They answered all of our questions that we had. Jason wasn't able to attend, but he did submit a list of questions that we were able to ask of the proponents.
Were you happier than the last go-round?
We learned exactly what we learned the last time.
So, but you're happy or unhappy? Is it going to work or not?
Well, we'll make it work. But it's the technology is not what people think it is necessarily. But what we learned was, as far as the data goes, we can capture a license plate, a GPS location. We can capture a date and a time, and from that, we'll have to figure out. And there's some reports that can come out of that. For instance, density mapping, enforcement. Activity can show you where a citation was written and by who at what time, et cetera. And there
so you know where your employees are, where they're walking and when they're walking.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, one of them had a real nice little map where it showed track where the individual, just where they walked, the tickets they wrote, the cars they scanned, everything. But we think there's probably more data crunching that's needed than just that. And so we know now what data can be obtained from these scans, and then we'll need to talk further about how do we answer the questions that people have, how's that data crunch. So we've looked at, we actually had, we're approached by one firm who does this kind of thing, but we're not at that point yet to move to that next level. So we have a meeting tomorrow to go through the pricing proposals, and then after that we expect to make a recommendation on what to do with the bids. So as I said, our plan to begin with is in 2020, the summer. By next summer, we hope to have electronic enforcement equipment in place where we can do the scanning, we can do the enforcement with the electronic ticketing. We hope to have in place a beginning, but not totally in place, electronic permitting system. What that'll allow us to do is to eventually replace the stickers that we put on cars with just the digital notice that a car's permitted to be where it is at whatever time shows up on the officer's enforcement screen. That probably won't be in full operation for another year because it takes time to qualify people who qualify for permits, get them into the system, but it allows them to purchase their permits online from home rather than coming into the police station and having to actually get something. We hope to have that in place. We've got a job description being reviewed right now for a parking coordinator. We hope to have that hired before too long, posting it shortly. And by next summer, we hope to also hire a full year-round parking enforcement officer who will be dedicated to the core area to working to enforce down there. So we still have some decision points that need to be made in terms of regulations to further the goal. You'd brought up some things in your discussions. Erica, can you go to the next screen? Oh, there is no. Never. Do you have the suggested changes? No? Okay.
Oh, not part of the PowerPoint. No.
Okay.
You wanted to bring those up?
Yeah, if you can.
Yeah, I think so.
So we're not asking you to obviously vote on these tonight, but we are maybe if you have a little feedback as to what you think. These are areas of the regulations that we're making suggestions for changes based on the feedback we've gotten from you already, and also feedback I've gotten from staff as to where they've seen challenges and problems. So if you go to the next page, the first one would be change number 1. This change would be necessary to implement a paid parking program. It gives us the statutory authority to actually implement a paid parking program. The only thing that would be deferred in this is if you go to section, the 4th paragraph, 206.4.3, the next page, right there in highlighted yellow, you'll need to make a decision about how many minutes of free parking you're going to allow, if any. I want to point out that both vendors advised us that's not a good idea because for a couple of reasons. One is no matter what anybody says, the equipment can't simply, you're not going to be there every 30 minutes or every hour to scan a car. And both of them are afraid what'll happen is that if you allow free time without logging into a system or paying at a kiosk first or going to a kiosk first, is you will clog up the appeals process with people appealing their tickets because they'll be arguing they weren't there for an hour. They don't know how the system works. They don't know that we go there, we scan it, we come back an hour later, an hour and a half later, we scan it, and it's over the hour, we ticket it. They're going to come in and say, we were there for an hour or less. How can that be? It's just, they said the fact of life is that it'll just clog up your system. But, if that's what you want to do, that's what you can do.
How do they recommend we handle 15 or 30s? They say you don't have any of those.
Two ways to deal with that. One is you just go on the honor system. You just post a sign, say 15 minutes. You hope the people self-police. They go in, they go out. You still go through on your patrols, you scan it. Every hour you come through, you scan it. Somebody's been there for more than an hour, you give them a ticket for that. That's one way, which is the way we'd probably recommend we do it. The other way is you actually have to take a person, put them there with, as one guy told us, give them a piece of chalk and tell them to have a fun all day, you know, in that 15-minute zone, because that's what it would take to absolutely guarantee that people didn't violate it. But we would recommend that we just go by the honor system, that you post a 15-minute sign. Now, we can ticket it for 15-minute violation. The system allows us to change the, you know, just because you're in a 1-hour zone doesn't mean you can't change it to a 15-minute violation going through when you ticket them. So if the officer happens to see it, and, you know, they can still ticket them.
So I'm just thinking, and this is details, we don't have to get to, but I'm just thinking, make it as simple as possible. Make it, you know, instead of having 15s and 30s and hours, and, you know, sort of pick 30s and hours and make it as simple as possible.
The simplest would be to make it one time zone for the bigger area.
Right.
Or to make, if you're going to have 30 minutes, have the 30 minutes in a contiguous area.
Right.
So that an officer goes into that area, we can time patrols so they go through every 30 minutes to scan. Right. And just so you know, just as informative, these scanners today you can put license plates on them and you can scan license plates, but majority of the data comes from scanning the barcode on the inspection sticker of the vehicle. They said most of the time, most of the officers actually, if there's an out-of-state plate or there's no inspection sticker, rather than try to scan the plate because of the difficulties that go with that, they just enter it manually to do. And that was with both of the, we looked at really two different types of equipment, and both of them said the same thing.
So with the 15 minutes, are you saying we would have, and I know this is details, but this is actually really important to me in terms of whether we ever do this. Would we have 15-minute spaces that are completely unticketed? I mean, unpaid? They would never scan into the system if they were
I guess
15 minutes
when you
long.
talk about 15-minute spaces or 30-minute spaces, I'm thinking of like around the post office where people go pull in, run into the post office. Okay. So what we would do is we'd post those 30 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever is appropriate. And then people would hopefully honor that 15 or 30-minute time limit.
And not log in. Not log
yeah,
into
they
the
wouldn't.
paid
They wouldn't
parking
have to do.
system.
They wouldn't have.
That's what I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding you correctly.
Yeah.
Chief, I got a question. Why 6.43?
Yes.
If we put 60 minutes, 3 hours, whatever we put in there, it's in the regulations. If we have to change it, we have to come back to. It has to be in the regulations. This part.
Well, this part was written by town council as such. So I suspect, you know, in Barnstable, their program doesn't have all these details like this in their regulation, because what they did is they told their parking staff to achieve a certain revenue level. That's their measure. Their parking staff has the freedom to say, you know what, we're not getting any utilization downtown from 11 to 1 every day. Let's make that free parking, get more cars downtown, and stuff like that. They have that kind of flexibility, but they've got a different system of operation over there than what we could implement here easily. So I think that's in there mainly because of the discussion you had about wanting to have an hour free parking for whatever. You can do it even, one thing you can do it even if you wanted to do it for people who qualified by being a year-round resident and not anybody else. You can do that. The systems can program that to happen. People would just have to register with the system, so we had their license plate, so we knew that it was a year-round resident, not a visitor. But there's a lot of things you can do, and how you write a regulation to cover all those, I don't know. So going on, so this first part here would just establish that, you know, what it takes to have a paid parking program in place. It gives us the authority to do it, to move forward. You have any questions about any of those?
I just want to point out too, at some point you'd need a fee schedule.
Yeah, that's...
We're not there yet,
No.
but if we're gonna go into it, you know, we'll have to figure that out later. It's a detail, but just, that's another thing in there. Did you talk, are you going to the fine?
About what?
The fine.
We're going into that.
Okay.
the fee schedule would just be attached as an addendum to the regulations when we adopted it. So change 2 is you'd indicated that you were interested in raising the overtime parking violation fine in the core area, not everywhere, but in the defined core area to $50 from $25. That can be done. There was a special legislation passed for Nantucket back in 2003 that allows a maximum of up to $50 for that particular violation. For whatever reason, in 2004, when they raised a bunch of parking rates or fines, they didn't change the overtime parking fine. So we can do that just by changing this regulation. We would amend Appendix J by adding Section E at the bottom, which would basically say that it'd be $50. These numbers are for the 15, 30, and 1 hour spaces. It'd be $50 for violation in those for any violation in the core area for those offenses. Oh, it also, and if you go back up, Erica, paragraphs, those 2 red marks, 206.2, those are for failing to pay at if you're required to pay. So if you go to a pay station and let's say you're there for an hour and a half, instead of an hour, and it's a 1 hour space, you get an hour free, if that's what you say, an hour free. So the next 30 minutes, if you're there past that hour and you didn't pay, then you'd be cited for one of these violations, which is failure to pay the required fee for parking in a metered space. Metered being however it's metered, by app or by kiosk or whatever. Okay.
And real quick, I can answer why the board changed in 04 is why that wasn't implemented. We also, at that point, that board rolled back. I think the enforcement went till 7 or 8 at night, and they rolled it back to 6, which means the 2 hour was at 4 and 3:30, and they rolled some things back based on complaints.
And to kind of divert to that issue of the rollback, one of the discussions we had was about having enforcement later in the evening. There's a couple of things you need to consider. We can do that. Matter of fact, we put in for more funding for more CSOs to be able to do that next summer. We could have enforcement till like 9, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, whatever you want. We can do a double shift. But what you might want to consider is rather than, I agree with the idea of having a later enforcement. I think it'll make a difference on the people that bring their cars in at 5 o'clock and park them all night. But you might want to consider having a different time length downtown after 5 or 6 o'clock. In other words, people can come down, go to dinner, not be rushed, and then get back out to their car. You might want to say after 6 o'clock we got, it's a 3 hour zone. And so basically from 6 to 9 it's 3, and from 9 to midnight it's 3 hours. And that gives you the ability to get at least one turnover opportunity during the night. And the officers can be down there to enforce that. And the way that would start would be, let's assume somebody pulls in at 5 o'clock, but after 6 o'clock, it goes to a 3 hour zone. Well, somebody pulls in at 5 o'clock, they're scanned. Well, come 8 o'clock, they'd be ticketed for being there for more than 3 hours if they're there past that time. So people would have to work through that. We would have to work through that as well. So that's one of the considerations you have to think about is if you want to make this later enforcement, 1 hour is probably not real functional for restaurants, but 2 or 3 hours might be, more than likely 3 hours. So next change, 3. This is necessary to implement an e-permitting program. So we have to put in here, right now our permitting language talks about adhesive stickers and placards and hanging things and everything else. Well, this just gives us the digital permits, and it gives us basically the option as to how we're going to do it administratively, whether a particular permit will be a hanging permit, a sticker, or a digital permit. For instance, I can tell you right now, beach stickers will probably remain as stickers because we don't have enough handheld readers to go around to all the areas where the ATV patrols and everything else go. Mainly the e-permits would be for permits like for residential parking districts and maybe other special permits we have for that affect the core and the residential parking area. So this section in 3 just gives us the ability to implement the e-permits. Section 4, this change is necessary to establish the ability to create neighborhood-based parking districts. Right now, we have 3 parking districts: the residential parking district, the core parking district, and the commercial parking district. And if you want to change or add to the residential parking district, you have to be contiguous to the residential parking district before you can even come into it or ask to come into it. What this change will do is several things. One, it'll allow us to create smaller neighborhood-specific districts. So if we could have some districts on the north side, the west side, the east side, the south side of town. We could have a district not even attached to the current residential parking district. For instance, if you wanted to deal with some of the parking issues we have out off of Brant Point in that area, we could go in there and set up some districts. The only criteria is that it's a minimum of 10,000 square feet. That prohibits or that prevents somebody from getting a urge to make a parking district in front of their home, and that's it, that kind of thing. So it does give you more areas.
Would you be able to do like a GPS circle around somebody's neighborhood? That way, if you're kind of on the verge of one district versus the other?
It would be done by street. The way it typically does, it says fronting the street on the thing. That way, the backyard is on the street, they don't qualify. It's the house has to front on a particular street. And the other big change in this, and what is really cumbersome and difficult about making existing changes to the district, is the requirement that abutters be notified by certified mail. And we're just saying that said notice should be done by publication in the publication of record, which would be the INCI, before any change is made, and then after the change is made, when it becomes effective and who's affected by it. So it'd make the process easier. If we had, if we don't change to smaller districts, leaving it alone without changing the publication or the notice is fine, because you're typically talking about just the street. But if we break this bigger residential parking district up into smaller neighborhoods, it would be hundreds of notices that we would have to deal with, which would be very problematic, because we actually saw one attempt to amend the residential parking district delayed significantly because there was a question as to whether all the abutters, if you remember, got the notice, and whether the proper abutters got the notice, that kind of thing. So if it's in the paper, you got notice. And
you can still give one a one-time free pass if they didn't know it.
Yeah,
you can still treat people. A lot of this isn't punitive right to start. It's you give people, okay, you didn't know, here you go.
Right.
But you'll know next time. So there's
typically you have some kind of an introduction into the process because with an e-permitting system, what we would want to do is we'd want to urge residents to pre-register. So we'd have to reach out to them anyway to get that done. It's just, it makes it so we can move forward with the process without having to worry about somebody not getting a letter or going to the wrong address. Change 4. I did that. Okay. Change number 5. This one is a result. This isn't necessarily something that you advocated for, certainly not, but it's been something that's been very challenging for the enforcement and the permitting staff here. When I ask all of them, I said, what's one thing we could change that'd make life easier for enforcement? And I think this is what they point to. And this is the guest house and hotels permits. We're not saying that guest houses and hotels shouldn't be given some consideration. We're proposing a way in which they can give consideration. Right now, we issue about 55 guest house permits per year. And that's about $5,500 in revenue to the town for that. We know that we've had many cases almost every year where these permits are abused. When they're not being used by a guest, they're being used by an employee of the establishment to park. We know that there's several guest houses that are actually charging their guests for that permit. The town's not getting that revenue. The guest house is getting that revenue. They're charging them for the parking. So what this does is it allows us, the town, to impose a fee of $10 a day for a temporary permit to park in those residential parking districts. The hotel, if they so choose, they can get online and purchase that permit for their guests, and they can either give it to the guests for free, or they can charge the guests $15 a day. Whatever they want to do, it's just the town's going to get their $10 a day for that permit that's there. And the other advantage is right now, they're given out on a formula. So if they've got 3 parking spaces, they'll get like 9, or they'll get 7 permits, for instance. So they got an equivalent of 10. We're saying do away with that. If they're a guest at a particular guest house, they can get a permit. They just have to put in the proof, which would be a receipt of some type into the system that shows they're a guest, or at the hotel that's in this district. You know, so in theory, every guest could get a permit. We know that doesn't happen, but in theory it could. So they would actually have more parking available for their guests under this system. So that's a change that we're asking for.
Chief, I like that idea, because I'm almost to the point where I want to remove that whole program during the summer, not maybe in September, to when a lot of the guest houses have, you know, workers coming in with their trucks and cars or whatever. Right. But in the summer, that would be, you know, policymakers saying, one way of saying don't bring your car if you're going to stay downtown. But this is, I like trying this first and see. I just don't like the abuse of it. So if it stops some of that abuse, I think that's a good move.
I think it'd be a big help.
Well, the other thing is it's also a numbers game. If there's 900 spaces in the core district, and you know, the number came up to be about 6%. The amount you're talking is about 6% of that. If that increases to become 10% or 15%, or if it, you know, if $10 is cheaper than 20 or a $50 ticket, and we see more of it, this is why you have to have, you know, someone working on this all the time and adjusting it. You know, we have to, and I think part of what we're having problems with right now is we're trying to lay an existing system. We're trying to make paid parking lay onto an existing system, you know, which is sort of some of the things we're talking about are difficult under our current rules, which we're going to be following still. They're less, you know, like, so the restaurant situation of 3 hours, et cetera, that's no problem if there's a kiosk and they're paying a little more each hour. It's a huge problem when you've only got 2 hours or you've only got 1 hour. You know, so I think some of this, you know, is kind of how we're doing it.
And then I think is there another one at change 6, Erica? There was some back and no. Okay, so there will be a change 6, which is an administerial change. It just gives us authority to go through the entire regulation and replace Board of Selectmen with Select Board. That's all it does. Okay. Any questions on any of those? Thank you very much.
Oh, and one other question. Will this mean there's no park and rolling once you have this system in place?
Yes, to some extent. We'll be able to identify it easier with the system.
Right, because it'll identify a specific car, and if they move it,
it'll identify the license plate, right? So right. And it'll be, what we'll do more than likely is we'll establish zones that probably be a street.
Right.
And when an officer goes into a particular zone to start scanning, they just got drop down, they hit zone 1 and they scan. And if it comes back and it shows that same car in that zone at a longer than the time, then they'd get it ticketed. So right. It really don't matter if it's over here or if it's over there or where it is, that they can't move like that.
Right. And
the regs already prohibit I think you have to move 50 feet or more. So, but it's difficult with chalk and stuff to figure that out because they wipe the chalk off.
Right.
Okay.
All right. And the reason I'm asking that is if we're going to set the fine at a higher number, but if you might be getting a double, you know, people might be getting it twice. If it's harder to park and roll and there's a higher fine, you know, so we have to be cognizant of that. You know, I would sort of favor the whole 1 hour area be, you know, you can only be in there for an hour and then make sure you get out to the 2 hours. That would be my take on it. If they spend a little more time in the 2 hours, that's not as big an issue. What we're trying to do is get the turnover in the core of the downtown.
Yeah, part of the, that's exactly one of the issues is, let's say we made the entire core area 1 hour and you can't be in the core area more than an hour, except for your free time. The problem that we run into, and believe me, we had this discussion with the vendors, is now on the data crunching, because it's kind of a math exercise to figure out the utilization from the number of cars scanned and the number of known parking spaces. So it makes your utilization of spaces less accurate the bigger the zones are. But
Right.
It may be an accuracy rate or error that we can live with.
Right.
We just have to figure that out.
Right.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. I was thinking if we, before Rob goes, I was thinking, would it make more sense to have Mike Burns go next? Because he's going to be taking us through the update of Transportation Goal 3, shifting the mode of choice of commuters from driving alone to using other modes by 6%. And some of that involves the data that we're talking about collecting from the license plate readers. And Rob's doesn't really relate to that. You follow? Sorry, Rob. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Libby's absolutely correct that some of the data that's derived from the scanners is going to help with this effort. But just so the public's aware, the goal number 3 is to shift the number of commuters that are driving alone, commuters being employees going to work, reduce that number of them driving alone by 6%. How that's being measured now is through the U.S. Census and the American Community Surveying. But there are other sources that we hopefully take advantage of, like the LPR scanners that the police are using, and the DPW could probably talk about a permanent traffic counting station. You might be aware of this, but just so the public knows, a permanent traffic counting station would be located at the intersection of Orange Street and Goose Pond Lane. That system has the ability to not only track the number of vehicles, but also modes, bicyclists and pedestrians, the number of those who are going through the intersection. So hopefully there are more accurate ways of tracking this number going into the future. How we achieve this goal is through a number of different efforts, one being marketing, and as you know, Remain Nantucket's always done a phenomenal job about contributing and partnering with the town and the NRTA for encouraging the use of other modes. Next, please. Chief also talked about the other strategy of help achieve this goal is creating a financial disincentive. That's absolutely a mechanism that has to be in place in order to weigh on all of our decision making on how we get from one place to another. We all make these economic judges ourselves, so having a strong parking management system it definitely goes a long way to incentivize not driving alone and parking all day long. Another way to get at this is providing other options. There's a number of points here listing on that. The Secretary of Transportation, Stephanie Pollock for DOT, really advocates for the over provision right now of mode choices for individuals to encourage biking, walking, but embrace these other modes such as telecommuting, even using scooters in parts of the Commonwealth. They may not be popular or applicable here, but just try to make these other options as available to the public as we as a community can do, so that the commuting public has another choice. And the next item later on the agenda, you're going to be talking about a bike share pilot. That program is going to go a long way to make those modes more accessible to people, so that there's no one feels helpless and that they have to drive alone because there's no other option. Again, Remain Nantucket's always been very generous in providing parking bollards and racks off the sidewalk for the downtown to make parking your bike and keeping it safe and secure. Have that be an amenity provided to the public to encourage biking. Next week, this is tonight, but it's actually next Wednesday, you'll talk about but expanding public transportation, using a commuter shuttle. So providing public transportation to the public is especially along heavily populated corridors like Old South Road, which is the fastest growing area of the island. That's going to go a long way to help address this goal. And then next, Rob's going to talk about some of the infrastructure improvements, sidewalks, bike lanes, to create an environment that's safe for people to actually use those modes. As far as where we are now, if you could go to the next slide, please. You've established this goal last year, and at the time that goal was established, the numbers that we had were from the 2016, and I believe later that was 2017, that these mode split statistics were provided. At the time, there was about 67% of the commuting public driving alone. That's actually a very good number nationally. So it's something to be proud of, but you did establish a goal to reduce that down by 6% to get more of a 60-40 split, 60% people driving alone. Recently, numbers have come out for 2018. Those numbers came out in the end of December, and it was discouraging. The trend's actually going in the wrong direction. There's actually increasing number of people driving alone. That number went up by 6.8%. So it almost doubles of what you want to do. If you did establish 66% as the baseline that you wanted to get down to 60%, the effort got doubled for you. Or you can maybe establish now that you set the goal in 2018, maybe use 73% as where you want to come down from. Again, this is American Community Survey. The precision of this isn't 100% reliable. There is some error in this, but it's a nice guide to track this. If you go to the next, please, we'll see actually where the problem areas of the island are. What's in red there, and again, this is the Bartlett Road, Old South Road, Fairgrounds area. It's where most of the year-round population lives, therefore, you're probably going to need to provide as much as you can in those areas so that people have the incentive to not drive alone. If you live in these areas and say you work downtown, perhaps you'd like to have a nice safe bike path. You'd like to have year-round transit, and those are currently being addressed. You have what Rob will talk about is the Goal 2 corridor, and that's prioritizing bike and pedestrian infrastructure within that area between Mid-Island and the ferries. But you've also just recently established year-round transit, and next week you'll talk about a way of even improving public transportation service. That's only going to make it more attractive for the public to actually help you achieve your goal by using another mode other than driving alone. Next, please. As far as next steps, next transition, yeah. It's nice to have some animation on the slides, but sometimes it messes you up. But it does look good. As far as next steps, I continue to identify data on mode choice. Again, I mentioned the perfect not perfect, but a permanent traffic counting station. The bids on that are out right now. The notice of the advertisement for the bid is out now. That's something that be installed probably in the next year. Again, that's going to do nothing but help you increase the precision of tracking this. The Nantucket data platform may also be able to help you with this with some of their innovative ways of tracking the modes that people use for transportation. They have a way of you doing that with the mobility data. Again, I would continue it's probably healthy to continue to refine your marketing efforts and the partnership with Remain and the work that they do, but also through what Janet Schulte does a lot with the visitor service and the culture and tourism, and market that. Christy might be able to do that also through the chamber. There's always been a healthy relationship to help get people to be aware of the options that are available, if nothing else. So Christy can elaborate on that. And then, providing more choices. Again, the next item later on the agenda is to talk about the bike pilot. That's going to go a long way to provide access to those other modes. And then again, you're going to talk about next week about expanding public transportation. These are all very healthy things to do. You got to provide the options to the traveling public if they're going to do that behavioral change that you want to do to achieve your goal. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
I just had more of a comment. I was just reading an article this week about Vienna, and they were trying to reduce the number of cars. And as an incentive, they have an app which, a small business created, that if you biked or took public transportation downtown, you got a free movie pass or a concert ticket. I thought that might be something to work with Remain and working with nonprofits on the island. Of how could we give an incentive of if you ride your bike downtown, you can go to the movies for free.
It's a fantastic program. I'm sure there's all kinds of things that you can get creative in offering the public.
When you look at the map you had up with sort of where most of the people are, we don't have that large an area to really cover well. When you really look at it, it's not the whole island. It's sort of the mid-island and out toward the airport, and sort of out toward the sewer beds. It's not that large. It's not that big an area.
Yeah.
And we should be able to figure out how to cover that, substantially. And it's one thing when you think of the whole island from Nantucket all the way to Sconset, but really it's that main area, like almost that circle. So.
And you said it, the airport is the fastest growing area of the island. It's just going to get more with the Richmond development and other developments as well.
Right.
So that's when you critique your investments in transportation, such as public transportation, I would keep an eye on, and you have in this area, especially with your Goal 2 corridor with infrastructure, but public transportation helps out too.
Before we go to Rob, I would like to recognize Mike. He is taking another job in a couple of weeks. I hope it's okay for me to say this. It was announced at Rotary today, so I thought it was appropriate. And I really want to take a moment while public is here to thank you for your work for the town. I think sometimes Mike gets a little abused for some of the information that he brings forward, and that is extremely unfortunate. But I've enjoyed working with you very much, and I'm glad we have a couple more weeks. And thank you for your work, and good luck in your new job.
I appreciate that. Everybody who says it that leaves the island, they're never going to forget this place, and they love it so much. And I feel exactly the same way. This is not an easy thing to do. So it's been my pleasure.
Congratulations.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that Mike Burns cannot leave. It's not our choice. Right?
And just so you know, we'll try to make fun of the other guy more than you. Whoever's guy or girl, whoever replaces you.
If you're able to do that, Matt. I didn't think it would be possible, but you might be able to.
Thank you very much, Mike. Rob's going to take us back to Goal 2, and I think you pretty much know what's happening with Goal 2, but just an update, mostly for the public.
So many of you know we have a article in front of town meeting, debt exclusion for improvements to Newtown Road corridor. We have recently started the existing conditions survey underway now for Sparks Ave section of Pleasant Street and the connecting William Street. Also, we're contemplating improvements along Orange, Main Street, as well as expecting spring 2020 now some sidewalk improvements that were previously scheduled between Coffin and Salem. So well underway, moving towards completion of transportation goal number 2. Any questions? Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
Okay, well, maybe you're not going to go too far, because we got environmental leadership is next. Yeah. And Goal 1 relates to solid waste management, and we've got a lot going on here.
So I know we're going to dive into the weeds at a future meeting, specific to Goal 1 here and some other pieces, but I'd like to highlight a number of things that are currently underway. Obviously, we're talking about data-driven recommendations for island-wide solid waste management. Jump to gathering data, some of the ongoing and active efforts on the next slide, please. So I'm happy to report that the board's support last year to move towards a separated waste stream when we recommended separating the non-recyclable, non-compostable waste from what was previously called household waste has been challenging. It's been quite an effort, and it's ongoing, but we have a measured 10% improvement and drop in less contamination in the compostable waste stream than we did just a year ago. To me, it's dramatic, and it is a testament to what we can do working together. So I want to say thank you to the board for giving us your support and your enthusiasm and encouragement last year. I look forward to continuing to work towards improving all of our waste streams with less and less contamination. Through that is really the only way I see forward that the town is going to be able to continue to get the best pricing and to be able to manage and make better decisions based on clean streams. Scalehouse private waste hauling information is currently being, it's ongoing with the Community Data Platform program. Met with them earlier today, and they are getting a real sense of what our waste streams. We have over 100 different Scalehouse codes for them to absorb and understand, years of data, years of policy changes which within those data streams, and a campus to be able to understand how things come and go. So it's helpful for us to review this from time to time because it is quite complex. It also helps us really review this and to become more efficient with our own processes. Continuing with the next slide, please. Thank you. And some additional data gathering efforts that you're aware of. UMass Field Station has done 2 of the first 4 for the year for the micro and macro plastics baseline determination, and we finished our waste summit, 6 months long, 6 months of different sessions. Many of you attended on waste-related topics. Summary to be published soon.
Did any of the input lead to changes that you think will improve it?
For the waste
Yeah,
summit,
like all the
from
different
waste
summits.
summit?
Yeah, did you get any good ideas?
We have I think there's a lot of different things that came out of it. I wouldn't say that every one of them are going to be actionable, but I think that we definitely had a few history lessons from folks that consistently came, which was great. There was definitely a few actionable items that I think we have taken under advisement and will be recommending soon.
Okay. Matt, I went to the hazardous waste one upstairs, and it was so valuable understanding the history, hearing how the haulers used to do it and a lot of the hurdles, and it was a really good discussion. So I will say that we've met with the regulators a couple times recently, and we forwarded the 2030 solid waste master plan from DEP forward to the board, so you can see what the state is looking at. It was actually really validating to see what we're up to here and what we've been striving for, because it really does align very well with what the state is up to. So they're appreciative and been very supportive of our efforts, our continued improvement efforts. We spoke to them about this potential upcoming colored bag pilot that we're looking to run this summer out at Tom Nevers. And so we were on the phone with DEP in the Central District, but with the Boston office and the commissioner, and dealing with another town, 2 towns actually, that were looking to do a similar effort. So it's nice. They were doing a full town-wide scale, and for us, we're looking at initiating with a pilot
see how it goes, see what the challenges are, and be able to measure the results, and then come back before you, maybe with a recommendation to go townwide with the effort. We've been coordinating very regularly with the Board of Health through the director to update and modify the rules and regulations for essentially haulers. It's technically called Rules and Regs for Removal, Transport, and Disposal of Solid Waste. We do have an upcoming public hearing. And generally, the changes are simply just to get in line with Mass DEP's regulated or model hauler regulations. Those have been supplied as well, if you're interested in reviewing those.
Can you explain the colored bag thing for the people on TV?
Sure. Generally, the colored bag system that we're working with a vendor on, hopefully soon, will be to provide a translucent colored plastic bag for each and every stream that we currently manage. So for recyclables, for instance, right now blue covers a number of different, it covers glass, shipping boxes, tin and aluminum, and plastic, thank you. So those streams would have their own individual color, not just blue anymore. Compost is green, and the Nernick, the non-recyclable, non-compostable, is currently black. So whatever system ultimately we come up with will match the colors with the name to make it quite simple for people to participate in a much easier way. That's if you're collecting it at home, putting it into a, and either delivering it to us or providing it to your hauler. So the difference is if you're a drop-off customer, you're still collecting your recyclables and separating them at home, so you wouldn't need those bags necessarily, because we still wouldn't ask you to bring them in bags. They would still go down the chutes like they normally do, loose, because that's a real benefit to us to not have, first off, the extra plastic.
And unbag them all, yeah.
And then secondly, it's already pre-sorted, so it helps the sorters to stay consistent. But it primarily would benefit the separation between the compost and the Nernick pile for drop-off customers. But for the folks that use haulers, the real benefit is when the hauler collects the material from the houses, they would be able to immediately start to distinguish the different piles when they're loading it into their stake body trucks. When they deliver it to our site, it's going to be a lot easier to commingle previously colored bag piles and make sure that they get it right. Oftentimes the contaminations that we see go unnoticed because they're buried in the truck, and so they end up getting dumped onto the composter floor, and generally sometimes they get mixed into the pile and you don't notice them. But if they're a distinguishable colored bag, it'll make policing the whole thing a lot easier. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, no, that's important. I think people are wondering. And the issue with black is if we've gone away from black bags. It would have to be maybe the Nernick stays clear. I don't know, but because you want to be able to look inside it. If you have a black bag that we can't look inside of, then we're back to.
Yeah, I think all the bags, the bags will be translucent either way. They will have some colorization to them, but we'll be certainly cognizant of that.
Romaine tested this out Daffodil Weekend last year, and they're going to be doing it again this year out in Sconset.
I would say just a quick note that you may have noticed the colored lids have gone live. So if we've gotten good feedback on that so far, and again, appreciate your support of that pilot that was successfully done over the last summer. 2020 single-use plastics. The work group has been very busy, and will continue to be, I think, right through the launch in June. So that's also underway. Next slide, please. We talked a little bit about the colored bag pilot. still under consideration. And then I listed out just a number of different things that is currently underway between the Waste Summit and grant programs, a number of different efforts that we've undertaken. We are still struggling with the composter study. I have some new ideas on that. Hopefully we can get that squared away before summer. I shared with you the waste sort trends. We accepted the grant tonight for the Moby project, and that's going to be beginning in earnest. We're hoping to do a little bit of PR over the radio and some other outlets leading up to summer. The litter derby is about to be announced again. Some of the flyers are already out there, but March 28th at the landfill this year, so the drop-off area. Last year, the first annual was out at Bartlett's Farm. There was great success. The amount of material was like 3.5 tons collected around the town. So we're hoping this year to minimize the handling of that material, not do it twice, but do it once at the landfill and get more participation that way. There's a number of other efforts listed there. If there's anything specific you'd like to expand on, I'm happy to talk about it. All right, we can move on, please. All right, just wanted to add in the 3 articles that are before the citizen warrant articles before you at town meeting this year. If you wanted to talk a little bit about those at all, the hazardous waste facility construction, incineration, or the 2021 plastics ban expansion. Hearing none, we will move on. All right, next steps. We continuing to review what happens next. 2025 is coming soon. So obviously we have been meeting with our work group for the last probably year and a half, and we'll continue to do that. I think we've some of the players have changed, so we are, I would say, revisiting this in a different way now, and we'll be hearing about that more soon. I expect to be back at the very latest in March to talk more about next steps and our schedule. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Rob. The second goal under environmental leadership has to do with water quality, and there's a lot going on with water quality.
Yes. So the primary focus, good evening, everyone, sorry. The primary focus of this goal is to finalize this island-wide water quality plan by the end of the year. And the goal is broken up into some immediate steps to kind of look at what all is going on, what are all the regulations. As you guys know better than anyone, we have like 1 million plans in the town that all have water quality pieces. And I'll turn over to Thais to go over a little bit of this, but some of that is just kind of compiling information at the start to kind of formulate this comprehensive plan for you guys to look at and review by the end of the year. So that's what we've really been pushing for over the last few months, and that's part of the update that we have tonight. So I'll turn it over to Thais.
You can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. All right, this is just for the public. Kept it brief, as hopefully you'll be happy because it's 8 o'clock tonight. But this is just some of our action items, one of the first being to identify barriers and hurdles to integrate existing plans that impact water quality, as well as exploring options and feasibility for improving our current water quality testing and procedures, as well as habitat quality evaluation metrics. Also, to create an inventory of existing state and federal laws and departmental programs and activities pertaining to water quality. And lastly, I'll talk about reviewing the Nantucket Water Quality Modeling Report. If you could just move to the next slide. So I wanted to be a little bit concise. So I'll just touch base on the summary of the items that our team has been working on surrounding water quality. The Natural Resources Department and the Health Department have engaged other on-island conservation nonprofits in an effort to standardize our water quality testing procedures and parameters for surface water testing. We did this by creating a standardized water quality and habitat evaluation data sheet. And in addition to our action item of assessing habitat evaluation and water quality, we also did pilot a study this past summer to evaluate the bay scallop and whelk populations, in addition to seagrasses, to gain a better overall understanding of the biologic health of the island's surface water. We're also currently assessing the feasibility of building an on-island water testing laboratory to address our water sampling logistical issues and sampling capacity. So that's currently ongoing, still waiting on some updates from that. In addition to talk about compiling the list of parent laws, we actually, to make this concise and actually usable, there are a lot of federal and state regulations surrounding water quality in general. So we pulled out specifically relevant sections to water quality management pertaining to for Nantucket that would be useful. So we did this, and this will help again with our first goal of creating this water resource management plan for the entire island, so that we can make sure that we're abiding by our regulations. And lastly, we did go through a lot of our, as Jeff said in the beginning, a lot of our plans for the town do cross over with water quality. And so we did compile existing plans in an effort to resolve and identify any conflicts in these goals. And that is also ongoing. So that was very brief and concise. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them or go into more detail in any of those items. I wasn't sure if we were going to discuss the Nantucket Long Pond modeling update, which we can both give a brief overview if you'd like.
I would say yes, because I think this may lead into some other issues that are going to need to be considered for capital projects.
Okay, great. I'm going to have Roberto jump in on this, and if you have any specific questions, I can also sit with you.
Okay, so after over a year of waiting for the report from Nantucket, we finally received the report in late October. We were able to put it in the packet for the Board of Health for review for a Nantucket regulation that we were looking to do in December. So the gist of it, of the Nantucket Long Pond study, is what it really came down to is we used data from our current landfill rather than using an analog to do our data, which is what happened before, which was the landfill from off island. We're now using we used on island data to run the same Nantucket estuaries plan and the model that SMAS does. What it really came down to is it's not the landfill that's causing a lot of the nutrient loading. It really points the finger more towards other sources. One of the issues that we've always been pretty sure of, and this actually kind of confirms it, is that a lot of the septic systems in that area, coupled with the high groundwater, leads to a large amount of the nutrient load. That being said, as a result of that, the Board of Health voted to keep a Nantucket regulation that mirrors the Nantucket Harbor's watershed regulation, which at every septic system failure, property transfer, a building permit that triggers any sort of enclosed space, which triggers our new construction definition, would have to upgrade that system to an IA. As many of you heard, through our Betterment program, the IA systems cost anywhere from $60,000 to $100,000, closer to that $100,000 in that Nantucket area due to mounding and high groundwater. We have approximately 200 IA systems in the area. We're going to need about another 200 or so. So just right off the bat, we're looking at a couple $1 million. I still have to crunch all the numbers because we have an average cost plus Nantucket has to be teased out. But right off the bat, we're looking at over $2 million burden of cost just for IA systems, which is not a permanent solution, and that would be borne 100% by the Nantucket landowners. The SMAS report also looked at 4 separate scenarios. that included everything from increasing aquaculture to dredging. These are all scenarios that we're looking at. We suggested going back and possibly running some of those scenarios in a compound fashion. So dredging mixed with IA systems, dredging mixed with sewering all of it, things like that. The only sure way to get rid of all that septic system runoff, nutrient load, is by sewering. But the increased flow through the estuaries also will help the Hither Creek Sentinel Station. I took a 40-something page report and tried to bring it down as close as possible without trying to bore you and have all your eyes glaze over, but I don't know if I succeeded, but I will try to answer questions on that. I know that there's a lot of questions on it that the Nantucket Residents Association has, that some of the conservation group has, and we're trying to answer those as quickly as possible as they come in.
Roberto, you said after this report came in, you're a little more confident, or very confident, that the landfill isn't the sole cause of Long Pond. Does everybody in the different departments feel that way and reading it the same? And
I would say yes. We have, if you don't mind, and Rob, if you have any comments on that as well.
I believe you, Roberto. I just was curious about how everybody's take on it was.
No, just to speak for natural resources, I think when we reviewed it is based upon the data that we had seen from CDM Smith on the landfill and from the data used in the initial report. I think the results that we got were kind of anticipated, and just reviewing it made a lot of sense, and I don't think we were surprised, and I think we agree with the results that came forward.
I just will make one point because I'm a numbers person. When the model was first run in 2009, the landfill, it was determined that the landfill had annual nitrogen load of 777 kilograms per year. And since the upgrades to the landfill with the lining of their leachate liners, and as well as recovering recyclable and reusable materials, that number has since gone down to 431 kilograms per year. And that was included in this updated model, if that gives a perspective for the improvements.
And I'd just like to add to that this issue was explained to me when I first started, and it made sense to me to add nitrogen sampling, nutrient sampling to the landfill regimen. We did that at a cost to the program, but it's something that has, I would say, initially now, at least the results are reaping the benefits. We're still committed to ongoing testing. This is going to continue. We want to make sure that we stay ahead and make sure that this trend continues. So it's not just we got one answer and we're done. So I just wanted to make sure people knew that as well. Thank you.
Did this last testing test for phosphorus? Or the modeling? Is the modeling testing for phosphorus, not just nitrogen? Okay.
We can send you the whole list of things that are being tested.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking is there's a line of thought that a lot of the eutrophication, a lot of the problems in the harbor are as much a phosphorus problem as it is a nitrogen problem.
Yeah, that's a good point. People tend to focus on nitrogen because it's a marine system, and so that is like the limited nutrient for that. So they focus on that one because when you have an excess of that, that's when your system's going to go off. Phosphorus is more dominant. People focus on for freshwater systems because that's the limiting nutrient for that. But both are measured and they're both obviously important, but that's why we focused on nitrogen.
And the state focuses mostly on nitrogen.
They do, yeah, for marine brackish waters.
Okay. And so, yeah, you guys should. We received a bunch of stuff on this, from a couple citizens, and I think it's important that we sort of follow up on on that aspect, because we don't want to be going down one path and find out that the phosphorus is part of it too. So
sure. So we actually have been doing that already. We do test for phosphorus, but if you guys remember, a couple years ago we came forward. We did a 604B project on Hummock Pond and Myakama Pond, and both of those, which are the fresher of the great ponds, we tested specifically the groundwater and groundwater flow for phosphorus loading and how that was moving, because phosphorus is much more of a concern there. So it is something we do look at. And I know we also talk a bit about the ratio of nitrogen to phosphorus in those systems. So that is something that we take into account when we put all these management strategies together.
Yeah, because some people feel very strongly against the SMAS, the way it's done, and and think there's other ways to look at it. It's just an interesting, which I didn't realize, but.
One of the things I know there's a lot of criticism of the SMAS project, and one of the things that's really important to also look at when you're looking at any of these models is that all of the things, especially with the fact that this is a living environment, that it's constantly changing, you have to approach it in a very general scientific method source. So we have our hypothesis, we have to test the hypothesis, go through, design your experiment, test it, do the whole thing. And if it points at it, we can start addressing that. If it points at something else, you go back in that cyclical portion of the scientific method. The SMAS model does have criticisms, and a lot of them are sound. And also, a lot of what the model is in there has been looked at and endorsed by the National Academy of Science, Medicine, and Technology.
Right.
So,
nothing's perfect. I get
exactly. Nothing is perfect. All right. Thank you.
And the only other correction is it's, I think, what did we have, 200 houses at $100,000 is what, 200 million, not 20 million. Yeah, so it's a substantial. Yeah.
I meant to have my numbers on
Well, yeah. I did it with my head, but
No worries.
I'm not that guy. Keep going, and I'll.
Okay, efficient town operations is the last focus area that we have goals for. And our first goal is to create a facility master plan for the town. There's a couple of items listed on the screen here. One of our first steps on this, which has not quite gotten off the ground yet, is to procure professional assistance to develop what I've said there, current conditions assessment for all public facilities. In our agenda setting meeting today, we I think basically decided that we are going to put this on next week's agenda to have more of a wide-ranging discussion about how we want to tackle this particular goal, including, I was going to try to come up with a little list of just considerations to think about, locations, energy efficiency issues, repurposing buildings, new buildings, renovated buildings, temporary space, all that kind of thing, coastal resiliency issues, sustainable issues, all that kind of thing. And so maybe, I don't know if we want to have a map or what information you guys might want. We're going to give you a little bit of background about things that have most recently happened to sort of help us figure out what's a good way for us to proceed down this path of getting at this goal. So that'll be on next week's agenda. The second goal.
Is that kind of a question? Or is that?
It wasn't really a question. But
Okay. No, I think we have a lot of this is already existing.
there is a lot of information out there.
We're going to do an overview.
Yeah, there's a lot that's
What's already
existing, and I think, in preparation for tonight, I took a look at sort of the size of the lot here, and I was a big proponent 20 years ago of keeping everything downtown. I think the horse is out of the barn, and I think it's pretty simple and I think all the department heads need to all be together. People need to be on one campus in one big building. And so I looked and said, is there room on sort of this property? And I think there is on the front and the side of the electric company building. Could put something up, as big as this or bigger on those two sides. There's enough space and keep the electric company building going while it's being built. So I think we have options, and it would still keep the parking. It would keep all the rest of it for housing. So I think, my perspective, we should be thinking that way. And I don't think we should be going down too many rabbit holes of let's go over to this corner of the island. Let's do some here. I think the goal when we make this choice is to put everything together for efficiency and for, so you guys aren't driving all around meeting each other, and so that there's some sort of cross-pollination between the various departments. And so I hope that that's sort of the direction we head when we talk about it.
And we had a feasibility study or a conceptual idea of exactly that. And in fact, the board's most recent action was to move all town offices out here, and we had a plan that showed how that could be accomplished. And then it just didn't really get furthered. There's also a plan to bring a number of departments together downtown at a renovated campus at 16 Broad. So I'm just, there's lots of opinions about downtown, out of town.
I don't think you were gonna get everybody into the downtown, though. I don't think it was gonna fit.
Well, probably not.
I just looked at the plans last week.
Yeah.
It can't happen, but it's 16 Broad and 20 South Water.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's tight, and it's 2 floors, and it's a lot of money. And
It would have to be that entire block. And, it basically it was either renovating the 20 South Water building and connecting it to the town building, removing the other 2 buildings and connecting them. And there was a lot of people that were going to be in there, but now we've got new positions and new activities that we've taken on, and so now there are more people that would be in there, and it hasn't been updated for 10 years, so we'd have to look at that.
Go ahead.
can we send that around to the board or put it in the packet for next week, that study of 16 Broad and 20 South Water?
Yeah.
Just email it, and I'm sure it's a big packet, and also the 2 fairgrounds, just so we can have some visions in our head of what's already been done.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's a huge file, but something to look through.
Yeah, it's quite a significant report, the 16 Broad one anyway, but yes, I think we can do that.
Well, since we're pre-talking about it, I was just going to throw out there, I like the idea personally of maintaining 2 campuses, but eliminating all of the other ancillary campuses in terms of town offices. I think that 37 and 39 Washington Street should go away and the town lot should be expanded. I think that we should maintain all the county services, including the courthouse in town, and probably some portion of administration, but I think that the majority, especially all of the car-dependent inspectional services, should definitely be out here, and eventually have the temporary move not be a permanent move to the fire station, so that we can redevelop that into something else. But we'll talk about that more next.
No, and I think you're right. When I talked about it, the county should stay downtown, and the registry of deeds with all the, otherwise you'll lose all the law offices downtown.
Yeah.
So there are a couple of things that stay there, but they can fit very easily in the existing building, maybe upgraded at some point.
But I don't know that we should pull all town offices out, but there might be some crossover.
So you will have a lot of time to talk about this next week.
This is going to be fun.
We're chomping at the bit, can you tell?
Goal 2 is to invest in technology, and I think Karen is going to take us through this one.
Good evening. So this goal is a fairly new one on the strategic plan, so we're at the beginning phases of this, and the IT governance team will be talking about these topics at our next quarterly meeting in March or April. The first one is to add public Wi-Fi access within 1 mile of the Pacific National Bank. And right now, this is in the research phase of what type of Wi-Fi services or hotspots you're going to put downtown. What is it going to look like? And there are a couple of different types of services that are available. And then, of course, feasibility and costs. Same thing basically at the 2 beaches, Surfside and Jetties. I spoke with Culture and Tourism, and they currently have Wi-Fi at Children's Beach. And that's one of the options we could look into for both of Surfside and Jetties. It's a Comcast business service, and we have Comcast has access to both of those concession buildings there. But there are limitations as to the reach of how far this service would extend onto the beach and in the parking lot. So there are pros and cons to doing it that way. So more research is needed on that as well. Again, feasibility and cost studies need to be done. As far as talking about public Wi-Fi across the island, with the exception of Great Point and Cove 2, this is a different type of project, and in the process right now of collecting data from both people within the town and as well as from other towns, what they have done, what their expectations were, how they addressed their public Wi-Fi in their towns, and whether they were successful or not at it. So I'm in the data collection phase, and this will be an agenda item for the IT governance team as well. Expanding and improving cell phone service, I have not really addressed this one, but it will be on the agenda as well. So next slide. So essentially, as a recap, the IT governance team is going to meet either in late March or April. That was left out on that slide. And these will, the items, the goals on the strategic plan will be on the agenda in this order. Would obviously address the beaches and the downtown because they might be easier projects to find solutions for and more cost effective. And I believe that researching island-wide options for providing access to the entire town and to the entire island is going to present some significant challenges and opportunities, as well as looking into whether we really have any control over cell phone improvements or not. So we have a lot to talk about at our next committee meeting, and I hope to have more information the next time I come before the board on this.
No,
questions?
just not really cell phone improvements, cell phone connectivity improvements. Is that what you mean?
Yes, correct. Not the cell phones themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, my IT guy says it has to do with he's dug into it with Comcast, and it has to do with not the switching and things on island, but the stuff on the other side. So the latency that we have in the summer is according to him, is a volume issue, and there's so much happening that things get knocked off, and the equipment can't handle it, sending it over from the other side. So there's,
And there's a lot going over on the Cape and off Cape about that exact situation.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Karen.
Thank you.
So that completes the strategic plan update, and it's February now. We'll probably do another one again right before you, or maybe even part of your next round of a strategic planning retreat to review, where we are and what you might want to modify, adopt, change, add, take off, that kind of thing. And I think we're trying to look at a date in June for that.
Did everybody take a look at those dates?
Yes.
Okay.
I couldn't do the May one.
Do what?
I couldn't do the May one.
Oh, okay.
May
But
5th.
did you respond back? Okay, great. So we'll have to figure that out. Okay.
But there's been a lot of good work done, and I
Yes.
really appreciate everyone's
I want to
efforts.
thank the departments. Thank you, and I want to thank all the departments that are involved, because we are really getting to operationalize strategic planning, and we're really working it into our thinking about capital projects and operational proposals and improvements and stuff like that. So everybody's really trying to get at it. So thank you all for being here and also your hard work.
Okay. Next up is select boards, reports, and comments. We have 3 bike share proposals before us. I think that all the applicants are here. I wanted to give them the opportunity to say something if they'd like to at this point, in whatever order, or you don't have to say anything if you don't want to.
Well, do you want to have Amy give a little overview?
Sure. Why don't I have Amy introduce it first?
Hello. So these 3 proposals were given in response to the micromobility bicycle share pilot program that we discussed earlier this year. We had put together, based on other pilot programs in other towns and with our attorneys, different qualifications, different things we were looking for. We're still we're still learning and trying to figure out how this best works and adapts to Nantucket. So we really took the general kind of guidelines when we're talking about equipment, data that we need to collect, things of that sort, and then ask them to respond how they would operate the business and how they would best serve the island's needs. Because again, we have these things and these guidelines that we really were looking at, but we really needed to see what was out there and who might respond. And again, every good idea that we get all day, every day, might be good somewhere else, but we're trying to figure out how it adapts to our unique location. So we did that. We had 3 responses, folks that we had been familiar with and worked through. Fortunately, BPAC hasn't met yet since we've gotten these, so they haven't reviewed them yet really for any official response. So I just wanted to put that out there as well. So, and again, it is not an RFP process. It's not a public hearing. It's not an official process that we've gone through in the past. So there's not like weighted options, things of that sort. There's more flexibility. And again, just to review that, should you select and move forward with this, it's a 1-year pilot program at the end of which we would want to collect the data and the experience and then decide as a town if it's something you want to move forward with, and then an RFP process would follow there. So again, we're asking folks to go through this pilot program with no guarantee at the end and how you would move forward with it. So that's obviously a risk that they're willing to take, I guess. I just want to make sure that was clear in that process.
When is BPAC's next meeting?
February 19th, I believe. Mike can speak to that. He, I know, sent this for them for a quick review, but they weren't meeting in January, so the 19th is the earliest. So,
okay.
So any questions beyond that? So again, we have the 3 proposals that were included. Questions?
Jump up real quick. Tobias Glidden, myself and Zach Dussault and a number of others. Thanks to the board for putting out this RFP or whatever you want to call it, proposal request. We responded to it. We'd love to work with the board in any way we can. Within kind of the outline, we highlighted some of the data we'll collect. We're more than happy to share in any way, any data. You know, we're here, we're local, whatever kind of process you want to go through. You know, we'd love to work with the town to make it work. I think it's a Amy said it best. It's unique on Nantucket to try to make something like this work. We've been operating electric bikes on Nantucket for the last year or so, and you know, we'd like to see if we can make something like this work and improve transportation on the island. So, and it's solar powered, so it's really cool. Thanks.
Thank you.
Tobias, before you go, just you're looking at, let me see, here's 100. You're saying 100 bikes approximately?
Yeah, you know, there's some benefits in scale, but there's a lot of risk in scale. So we're trying to hit the midpoint. You know, we've got about 30 bikes already, so you know we could launch, you know, probably by mid-April with the bikes we have, kind of test it out, and then our kind of thought is that we'd kind of scale as we go along. You know, because you're not gonna, you know, from our rentals last year, you don't really hit those usage peaks till like, you know, late July, August.
Right. And if we, you know, and if we found this was the worst idea ever, you're not bankrupt if we say no next year?
Well, hopefully, I don't know. We'll,
I'm just
like we got to figure that out. I think all the applicants do. You know, it's a challenge. You know, there's some scalability there, and I think the intention is, you know, to work with the town to see if this can work. You know, if there's really demand for it, you know, at what, you know, the flexibility is what makes these things work. Like that's why Uber works. It's like, well, there's not a lot of demand, so the price is cheap, so you take Uber. You know, that's how the model works. So the flexibility is key, and you know, we have a good relationship with Amy. We'd like to work with her to make it work. There's no guarantees though, Matt, you know.
No, I'm going to ask the same thing to everybody because it's really a pretty unique situation. all right.
Yeah, no, I was just going to just top that when we're talking about number of bikes, and I think we've discussed it in different towns and things. Unfortunately, it's not had a great success rate in similar types of towns, and I think one of the things was, they didn't have enough bikes. There was a smaller number. 100 is about the level we're looking at as far as we don't want too much, but it has to be viable enough for these folks to not be, just not able to do it financially. So that's kind of the level we're looking at. And again, we can adapt our final MOU or agreement as we see fit, but that's kind of the number we thought, based on experience in other towns, would be manageable.
I had a question, Tobias. You and Zach, your bikes, your current bikes, which are great. I tested them out this year.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to have the micro-mobility bikes, will they look the same or will they look different?
For the most part, they'd look the same, but they would distinguish themselves. They'd probably have like a little different sticker. There'd be a different style rack on the back, accommodating a helmet. I think we'd like to jazz them up a little bit, to distinguish them as like a bike share. Just like renting a bike, if you just have a regular rack on it, you're not, encouraging people to use it as much. When people rent a bike, it's different than like a ride share. So we're thinking, having like a rack that makes it just a little easier to leave your bag might encourage people to use it a little more. So it'll be a little different.
Thanks.
Good evening, Madam Chairman and board members. I'm Barbara Grady, and I'm here with one of my partners, Emily Dugan. We are the applicants of C-Bikes. We've submitted the proposal, and just as Tobias has said, we are willing to work closely with the town. I think this is a work in progress for both the town and the applicant as we attempt to find what is the good mix between the number of bikes and what the usage is and where the demand is. There are many bike share businesses around the nation. A few of them now are moving to a strict e-bike share or pedal assist bike share. So it's a relatively new concept in terms of alternate means of transportation. And so I think it's going to be a learning project for whomever the town selects. And I think one of the key components is the applicant willing to work closely with the town, because I think, as you said, it's going to be work in progress all along the way. I also think it makes some sense to have a slower rollout rather than dumping 100 bikes at one time on the island. So that's what our proposal also is to do a slower rollout so that we can learn, the town can learn what the needs are and what the demand is. Similarly, the proposal speaks to all of the pretty incredible technology that's available now in terms of what these things can do and what you can keep them from doing. And so the goal is to have a program that the town is thrilled with, that the users are thrilled with, and that ultimately we would be thrilled with as well. So with that, any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Sort of the same issue. You're looking at 25 to 50 initially, and then maybe getting up to 100.
Correct.
And and have you done the financials? If you do a one-year project, are you okay?
Well, it's a pretty significant investment.
I know.
So we would hope, obviously, that the business model would go beyond 1 year. And obviously, if you make that kind of an investment, if the town decides they don't want it here, we would try and find some other place for the bikes to be used. So
Okay.
I think it's a model that works elsewhere, the sister islands here. As the board knows, my application, I'm in from Rhode Island. There's been talk about it in Newport, Block Island. But our preference is to be here, start here, and stay here.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening, Select Board. Tom Holt, Sandy Pedals Bikes. First off, I'd just like to thank each and every one of you. For the past year now, I've been in contact and taking your questions and concerns and trying to adapt this system with you all so we can actually make this a Nantucket bike share, not just an e-bike share. That's going to be the biggest thing. Whoever ends up getting this, we're going to have to adapt it to be different because we are different. Along with thanking you all, I'd like to thank Amy and Mike because they've put extra food on their plate here. Like, they didn't have to do this, and I appreciate them taking that time. As far as all the hard work and 2 years of concept and everything that I've kind of put into this in the year or a little over of a year kind of working with the town, I think that I have a really strong idea and great grasp on where we need to go. A lot of that is, even while I'm waiting through this process, I've been canvassing the downtown area. Like the map showed where most of the commuters are. I've been canvassing that and getting permission from private businesses and landowners to actually have the right to put racks so that we can create a greater grid for parking. And that's one of the big keys about this is we need to establish a great grid for parking, because if we only have a couple spots here and there, it's not that functional. So as far as the money side goes, Matt, so you don't have to ask me, it's
I don't mind asking.
Yeah, it's a risk. Yeah. I know it. I've known it since day one. As far as the rollout, for what my manufacturer wants to start with, I'm going to hopefully get by mid-April 50 bicycles. I might push it to 75, but if I have the ability to send them in multiple different directions, then it's not going to be a dumping on the island. You'll see them dotted all around. And so it'll create a larger accessibility to the people that need it or want to use it and get out of their cars. And to the financial aspect of it, I'm a risk taker, and the people that I've talked to are risk takers. I've told them what they're getting into, and I have a lot of personal money in it. I'm not going to go bankrupt, but I'll lose it, and that'll suck. And so will my investors. But we all understand our risks, and that's just kind of where we're at. I don't know. I appreciate you all doing this for us, because whoever the applicant is, there's a loss or a gap in transportation here, and it needs to be filled. So yeah, thank you. Any questions? Yeah.
Just in the comparison, I think you should clarify the price point. It had a $200 application fee, but I think that was meant for year-round.
That's for year-round residents. So it'll just be a flat rate and that's also something I'm playing with. It might end up being closer to $125. But I'm hoping to implement programs for off-island day trippers, so I can have a station downtown where they can use those bikes to get to their job sites, as well as the year-round commuter. Instead of having to pay that $15, it only costs them 25 cents to go from point A to point B, or $1 to get from Stop and Shop down to downtown Stop and Shop, or the boat. Because like on the bike that I'm currently riding right now, without breaking a sweat, I can do it in 6 minutes. You know what I mean? So you're looking at $1.50, and that's over time. If you do that every single day, it's going to add up twice a day. And so if I bring an annual application fee, then that'll alleviate some of the stress for the people that don't have that extra money.
Thanks.
Anything else?
I would say, I was going to ask a little bit about that, but
sure.
A lot of my employees all come in the summer. They're all buying bikes. Mm-hmm. I would warn you about charging too little, or they'll all be parked at my employee housing down the street.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're charging them $150, I know where all your bikes will be.
Well, so and there's going to be a scale, and this in particular, what Christy was getting to was more for the year-round resident. Right. There'll hopefully also be another program for our seasonal employees, because like a bike at Walmart is $125, but that ends up on a rack rotting, and the DPW has to remove it, and that costs the town more than it costs that seasonal employee. So if I can get them to be comfortable at a price of like $200 to $250, they know they have a quality working bicycle every single day, instead of something without brakes that they might hurt themselves on. That's kind of what I'm hoping for, is to, again, this is all adaptable, it's all new. My working with Lattice and my understanding of this market, we're going to have to change some things, and we're all going to have to be flexible. And I currently have the capability to do that. But thank you all again. I really appreciate you all going through this and doing it for us. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Harvey, did you send an application in? I didn't get yours.
Well, thank you for an opportunity to speak. I did not apply at this time. My name is Harvey Young. I own and operate Young's Bicycle Shop, and I see the future coming. I see it with Uber and Lyft and how that's affected the taxi business. I see it with VRBO, vacation rental by owner, and how that's affected bed and breakfasts and small inns. And I see it coming with the bike share and micro mobility, and I'm looking forward to figuring out how to adapt to that in my business and what I'm doing here. I appreciate that the town is trying to figure out how to get a handle on this with some regulations and some applications, so they can kind of get ahead of it and it doesn't just happen. I would like to thank Amy Baxter and the licensing and her crew for the efforts they've gone through to put together the licensing requirements and the plans so that we can deal with this in the future. I do have a couple of concerns from my years of experience with bicycles in Nantucket that I do want to share with you. What is dockless bike share? Do we understand what that means? Do we know what it means to have a dockless bike share business operating in Nantucket? How will it affect well-established brick and mortar tax-paying businesses that are here doing the bicycle business now on the island? If we add 100 motorized bicycles, they don't always talk about these being motorized, but these are motorized bicycles that can go up to 20 miles an hour. If we add that to our infrastructure, how is that going to affect the multi-use paths where there's all kinds of regular bicycle traffic, people walking, people with strollers, and that type of thing? These are just some of the questions that I think you want to make sure you ask before you issue the license. The application process asks for maps and plans of specifically where you will conduct business. I looked through the maps, looked very vague. One applicant has a map that shows all of downtown. One applicant has a map that highlights downtown, the Mid-Island, Cisco, Nantucket, and Sconset. Can you just leave these bikes anywhere you want in Sconset? When you're done with them, I'm not sure how that all works. So I think a big question is like, where do you conduct business? Do you conduct business on the streets? Can you just leave your bike if you're a customer in front of the hub when you're done with it? Can you just leave your bikes all down at the High Line when you're done with them? Can you just park your bike for someone else to rent on the sidewalk right in front of my business? And the other bike businesses. I'm not sure if you've considered maybe like food trucks where there's a buffer zone from other businesses. I think that would be important to incorporate into that. Is this business going to be conducted on town property or on private property? So those are just a couple of things I think you should consider before you issue a license. I think you should have a clear and specific plan. I know a lot of this is going to evolve as it goes on, but I think it's important to have a very clear and specific plan of where this is going to be done physically. I think the state and local regulations for the use of electric motorbikes need to be really clear for Nantucket. Are they allowed on the bike paths? Are they allowed on the multi-use paths? Will they be using the road like mopeds going 20 miles an hour? And I hope those are things that you'll consider as you look at this. I understand it's a pilot project. I'm not 100% clear on what you're measuring in the pilot project or how you will determine if it's met those requirements. I mean, really, my main advice to the town would be to proceed cautiously and not to rush into it. The whole, take a look at what are some of the unintended consequences. Are they all just going to end up over at Matt's Bakery? So I look forward to your answers to those questions. I thank you for your time, and thank you.
Thank you.
I think, Jason, if you don't, Jason, we can answer a couple of those, I think.
Or Amy.
I was going to ask if BPAC has reviewed all of those.
Yeah, I mean, some of those have been talked about. I think one of the concerns was to have these not be able to be just parked wherever and picked up. That was originally sort of what we were told was going to happen, and BPAC is recommending that they be geofenced and have places they have to be start at and end at. And if they don't, there's a fine or there's a continue to be a charge involved for that reason, so that they don't end up, at my dorm or wherever. So that was one issue that you asked about. I think, the intent would be, we can't do anything about private property. I guess in a regulation we could say, and I guess in a regulation we could say, please be 200 feet away from an existing bike shop or something, but, it's hard for us to do anything with private property. If you want to.
Yeah, thank you, Harvey. Unintended consequences is my favorite phrase lately, is what I'm always trying to think about. Is private property. I think when I originally went into this, I had the same concerns. I kind of envisioned this as more of the staging locations being on maybe some of NIR property where people come in, things downtown of that sort. When I started to look at some of these, I was a little concerned they seem to rely on placing bikes at some beach locations and town locations. And that's obviously why we're involved in this. If it was just NIR saying they had some electric bikes for their folks to rent on their property and they had to bring them back there, we wouldn't be involved. But this is going to be involving a lot of public properties, and that's where the concern is, and that's where we're looking these regulations in. My main concern through this whole thing was, and more I read through MOUs that our legal counsel sent to me from other towns, is that they're operating with ordinances already in place as far as bike parking, as far as abandonment of bicycles. They have actual ordinances in those towns already, and we do not have those same type of things already set up. So we don't have those things in place already. We're not adding to an already established bike licensing or bike regulation system. We're coming in with this as a on the side one-off here because it is going to affect public property. So the private property agreement's great if they're going to be staging on those types of things, and we can understand the geofencing capabilities. Again, we're learning this as we go on top of everything else. So I can't confirm they all have that, but they all have talked to it. So they have the data, the presentations look good. In operation, are we going to have to do a lot of babysitting on this? Is there going to be, again, DPW and police are already dealing with abandoned bikes on a normal basis. Is this going to add to that? Again, one other thing we put in there, and I think Mike can respond to, is we have about 300 spaces on public, give or take, if you want to think about bike racks on public properties. We're estimating about 300, so think of that as well. And again, my original thought as we were growing this project, it could be something very good and beneficial. But do we grow it out of our existing businesses, existing folks that are here, or it grows and it's a natural outgrowth? It's a natural expansion of what's here already.
Madam Chair, I just want to. I was going to interrupt you for a second. I just want to remind us we're awarding a proposal tonight, not deciding if we're going to do this program. I think it's
right.
good to talk about unintended
Sorry,
consequences.
I was going off on a tangent there.
And to answer Harvey's questions, because this is very new. But I just want to remind us that we can decide not to award tonight.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's the right move, but we're awarding, not deciding if we're going to do a bike share program.
Correct, and we're still working on memorandum of understandings, different things and that. So those types of things, the insurance things that they would have to, similar to, say, we award a license of another kind of liquor, that sort of thing, they still have to go through inspections. They still have to go through state review. They still have to go through those sorts of things. So you would decide on whether this is something you want to move forward with, and then we would still work on all of that and
A list
And
of, a list of geofenced areas where they're gonna be.
Correct.
That, you know, contact information.
Locations we
Yeah.
would be okay with staging
If this
20
is-
bikes at or whatever.
Assuming this is awarded tonight, sorry, Ryan, go ahead. Maybe BPAC can dedicate a whole meeting to just this on the MOU and bring in the public and bring in, I don't want to do a committee, but I think we can use BPAC to dig into this 1 or 2 times.
For the MOU.
For MOU to
That's a good idea.
to, you know, have,
And
have Harvey and everybody else come in and really dig into it.
And I'd like to say I just found out tonight Mike was leaving, so thanks.
You're getting up just in time.
He did not tell me. He did not tell me. I was like, okay. So yeah, but that would be.
So you know who's gonna get blamed for this?
Yeah, I think I turned around and
There's a
looked at
guy
Chief,
down
he
in-
was like, yeah. So anyway, but yeah, we can certainly do that, and we have that flexibility still.
Wait a second, Mike, am I going to be the admin too at BPAC now? All right, great.
Yeah. If this goes well, Jason, it's your idea, and if it goes poorly, it's Mike's.
Right.
Can't believe Mike let this happen.
I had a question more for the applicants, as you were talking about public spaces and the number of bike rack spaces. Where will the bikes be parked overnight? Will they go back to your location, or will they be staying at some of these bike racks?
So how Zach and I have envisioned it for Wheels of Delight and Great Crest and Christie is that the majority of the bikes would be on private property, so either at our location downtown, the Mid-Island location, and then amongst various private entities, hotels, inns and whatnot. We don't necessarily envision it, bikes like on Main Street, but the bikes at those private locations would be out in the open overnight.
Thanks.
Similarly to Tobias, I have multiple capabilities to adjust the parking. So it wouldn't be, I have a hub that I have verbal confirmation from downtown, which I'd be conducting most of the business. It's private. And then I have other private entities in this downtown area. And so I'd actually have hub stations and destination stations. And do not go stations. And so they would be, the rider would actually see on their app where they can and cannot park, either long-term or short-term or not at all. I'd also like to, just something about skeleton bikes that are left on this island that Amy brought up. I've reached out to several nonprofits that actually deal with these. And so that's something else, it wasn't asked in the proposal, but it's something else that I've looked into, is actually collecting some of these bicycles, if not all of them, and donating them to these organizations so they can fix them up and send them overseas, just to help the town out.
In our proposal, same thing, is a hybrid of both, where some would be stored at our on-site location on Sparks Ave, but also some would be left in the community. They would be repositioned every day/night, with the hope that that some would be at bike racks. We've offered in our proposal to purchase additional racks for the town if that's necessary, assuming we have space. And we've also been in communication with a number of private businesses to locate racks at their locations where we think there will be demand for the pedal assist bikes. So it's a hybrid of both.
Other questions? Or?
I had a question for the applicants. Does your technology that you use allow you to cap the speed at, say, 16 if the MOU asks for that? Or is it 20 or?
With the bikes that I'm using, I can make them go a mile an hour if I want.
The electric assist.
The electric assist.
You could turn off at 16.
I can set any governor I want to the motor.
Okay. If they all can do that, that's helpful.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be 20. It could be, we could
15.
say 15 or 14.
Yeah. But yeah, that's something that I ride one of these, as I know Tobias does as well, but like 20 miles per hour is pretty fast. Mm-hmm. And so that's one reason that I reached out to my manufacturer, was like, can I adapt this in a system? And basically I can go in there and do whatever I want to the bikes.
Because you're a class 1 bike, what's the max on a class 1?
20.
20, okay.
Yeah.
But it's just pedal assist, no
Yeah.
throttle.
Yeah. So you're getting nothing unless you start pedaling. So you have to put out some effort.
Yeah.
Does everybody else, does everybody else's technology do that?
By the way, our bikes also have the ability with the technology to slow down in different areas. So if they were on the bike path going 20 miles an hour, but in town, the town wanted to restrict speed in town or in certain areas or in residential areas, we could do that as well. So that's an option to do.
That's interesting, because a milestone, you could maybe go to 18, milestone bike path. 'cause
And you
there's
guys
no
are
driveways
class
and-
2 bikes, so those.
Can I get at that real quick?
milestone.
I think it should be one speed, because it's just like safety. It's like if you need to avoid something, you want to be able to go the speed. It should be ubiquitous across the island, whatever the speed is.
What do you think that speed should be?
I think, personally, I think 20 is fine because they're pedal assist bikes. So you have to pedal hard to go 20. Most of the time, on our bikes that we've sent people out, they give us feedback that they're literally going anywhere between 12 and 14. And that's just what they go at. It's just kind of a comfortable speed for them where they're at. And then for some folks, they say they're on dirt roads and they like to get out and get moving a little bit. They go a little faster. But it's pedal assist, so you have to work to go that speed, which I think is real key.
I think it might make some sense, though, and particularly as this program starts out, in areas that we know there's going to be significant pedestrian congestion in town, where you've got the cobblestone streets, to be able to restrict the speed in town to whatever a recommended speed may be. And when you're on a path or out a milestone, that's a different animal altogether. So there is that capability.
Another question on the tech side. My electric bike has 3 speeds, then a sport speed, then like the crazy speed that I turned off. I don't even want to on how fast it accelerates. Does your guys have that? Maybe it's not a big deal or not.
Mine does. I think all of them. No, yours don't. So again,
It's like a 1, 2, or 3.
I have there's 4 on mine, but I can adapt it and put it down to 2 and get rid of crazy and sport, so you can only go eco and friendly,
Okay. Just one.
Harvey.
So did I hear, are you planning to issue a license tonight? Or
It would
issue
be the award of who the town's going to partner with in this pilot, and then it would be subject to an agreement that would
okay, so in
take
terms
a lot
of
of these things into consideration.
Okay, so in terms of a map of where they're going to conduct business and what that will come later?
That would be part of a MOU and the regulations that we'd put forth with it, that we have models from other towns for that. That would all come with it, yes.
That's what I was suggesting,
So-
that maybe BPAC could dig
Right.
into for a meeting or two on digging on the memorandum of understanding and look at all the
Right.
little details that you brought up and that we haven't even thought about yet.
Right.
They
'Cause I think
provided
other-
some of the information, but
So to
I think some people in the community, I'm not sure if they even know this is coming. I know it's been in the works for a little while, but they might be interested to know, like, can bikes be left all over the place? Where can they be left? Where can they be started? So that's part of the dockless micro mobility questions that I hope you guys will answer. Thank you.
thank you.
And I think all the applicants laid out that they would only be parked at bike racks, not on the street. Or
Bike
anything
racks, there's just going through all these things that other towns have dealt with as far as wind blowing things over, as far as different things with the kickstand and different capabilities. I know that some of these have as well, but at the end of the day, anyone can leave a bike anywhere. We need to make sure that that's consistent all across the board. Any bike can't be in a bike path or in the sidewalk, things of that sort. So, and they are going to have to, what's the word? Move your stuff back to reposition. Thank you. 9:00. Reposition the bikes every day and that sort of thing by end of day. So there's going to be those requirements too as well. They'll have their app. They should be able to see where their bikes are left and respond to that. And there's time limits as far as how they have to respond if the town says we have complaints. There's a bike here, there's a bike there. They have to respond in a certain amount of time too as well. So that would be in there.
So just to kind of touch on some of that, Harvey, my app process, what you can do is the geofence that you create. If your little dot on your phone isn't inside that geofence, you can't lock the bicycle and you're still paying for it. So you have to get inside and lock it up before you're actually stopped charging. If that individual decides to park it outside of one of the geofenced areas, that's when a $25 fee, depending on how egregious the misparked bike is, I can up it to more, especially if it's vandalized or something. So another part of that app is the only way to end this ride is to take a picture and show me where you've parked it. So I have control over kind of where these people are going to be just littering them all over the island.
Thank you.
Zach Dussault with Wheels to the Light. So also our app that we'll be using will also have an onboarding, very educational onboarding feature so that we can kind of address some of these issues of safety as well as, where we want you to park the bikes and kind of the protocol of how you end your rental so that, you can be in compliance with kind of what we develop together with the town so that everybody's working to keep these bikes off random streets in spots that we've specified. So, and again, real-time tracking, anybody parks a bike instantly, we will know if they're outside of a geofenced area and we'll be able to collect that bike as quickly as we can.
Okay. Any other questions? Does the board wish to award this tonight?
I'm fine. I was just thinking, are we doing little secret ballot votes? Are we going to make a motion, see if it passes?
Yeah, I don't know. What's the format?
I don't know.
I don't think it's official. We're not, again, doing an RFP or that sort of situation. I think you can probably vote how you wish to do so to move forward with a specific applicant. Perhaps maybe list, maybe what led you in that direction or what you think was best. And then that is, you have a policy contingent upon them working with the town and BPAC and whomever to an agreement, a final agreement. So you're voting to move forward with a specific applicant to further this program along. And then we would report back with certainly conditions and a final agreement.
For me, there's bits and pieces that I love of all three, and they're different. C-Bikes is a great presentation. They're the most prepared, and I think professional. Just looking at what you guys, the application you put in, they came to BPAC, so there's a little bit of background there. The big advantage I see for the Wheels of Delight is solar. That's pretty cool. It's powered by solar, even if it was a small percentage, or it's great. They have an existing business here with electric bikes. That's an advantage from fixing them, mechanical, right? So they're kind of in the game. And I think Sandy Pedals, has done the most work over the last 18 months and thinking about it and digging in. And so he's prepared in other ways there. So I see really good advantages on both. I think wanted just to be as transparent as possible. Looking at the application for C-Bikes, it's more of a seasonal thing. And I think that having someone, a vendor that's here year-round all the time, I'm not doing you're not year-round, not accepting you kind of thing, is this program might not work in November, but it will for 4 days during Christmas stroll, and then it will for some random Ellen Hildebrand weekend, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then nothing for 3 weeks, and then so there's a benefit to Sandy Pedals and Wheels of the Light in that. Doesn't mean that C-Bikes couldn't adapt to that. I'm trying to give the board all my thoughts.
Well, there was something that struck me as I was thinking about this being the commuter lot for all of the commercial vehicles, and if they could use them to get from the High Line here when they're commuting That would be huge on a year-round basis. But
If you've
just
seen
to
those
pick up
guys
on
going
what you
on or
just
off
said.
the boat and what they're carrying.
Not all
Not all of them, a good number of them though.
No, but not always, and they don't necessarily have to do it that way.
No, exactly. They might change, and it could do a few of them.
Some of my thoughts, just reviewing everything. I'm, not part of BPAC, so I haven't been in it as long as Jason and Matt. Looking at everything, I know that Tom has really been, Sandy Petals has been really involved since the beginning, and I kind of feel like we wouldn't be here if he hadn't started that partnership with the town, and I think that's something that's really important to value. A lot of other towns, people go in and start these businesses, and then the town's fighting to catch up to it, and I think the fact that he started this approach should be considered as we consider all these proposals tonight.
Yeah, I'm very torn because I think all of you will be would do a good job.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, I'm the same. I think that there's 3 good applicants. So the question, and I sort of asked the question, I look at it somewhat from a business perspective, and, we've got an existing business that's already up and running that, if we're doing a trial and they don't make it, is going to be in less, sort of less situation than Tom would be. But then I think, I agree with you that Tom has put the effort in that has got us here. I sort of wish that a couple of you had been, combined from a business standpoint as opposed to separate. It would be a little easier, but, I don't know.
I agree with everything that's been said. Do we want to do a ballot vote?
Or how do we sort it? I mean, that's the.
I'm fine with
You wanted to make a motion, or do you want to do a ballot?
I think this is fine, because then everybody can not have to decide on one motion or not.
Did you say that?
What's that?
Oh, we need one
more. Oh, it's coming back.
Write your name on it. Okay. Christy voted for Sandy Petals. Matt voted for Wheels of Delight. Jason voted for Sandy Petals. And Dawn voted for Sandy Petals. And again, I think everybody would have done a great job.
Yeah, and again, at the end of the year, we may be going to an RFP process, so
Right.
that would be
This is a pilot.
open again. So we will move forward with Sandy Petals and work with BPAC and come back to you with those conditions and an MOU.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And thank you all for your time and sitting through this very long meeting.
Thank you all. I appreciate it. And Amy, thank you again.
Thanks.
I look forward to working with you all.
Okay, we're on to committee reports. I just want to let you guys all know that I have received a summons to appear in court tomorrow for the Frank Daly dogs. Just so you know. I don't think any of you are receiving one
When did that happen?
today.
Oh, you just found out today?
It was delivered to my house
You have to go tomorrow?
tomorrow at 11.
Is that how it's?
I just
how it
thought that I should let you know while we're all together.
What if you were not here, or?
Well, I would reach out.
Then you'd be going.
I think it was the chair and the vice chair, and Rita was not able to attend, so she was able to get out of it, but
Well, thank you for.
Do you know what time, is it gonna be at 11? You have no idea.
I have no idea, but I'll keep you posted if needed.
If
we
you,
have town council here?
Yeah, Brian Riley's going to be here.
Okay.
So
Okay.
So that was my committee report. Well, no, we had a very good meeting on our island home on Monday. Good discussion, and we're going to move forward with actually a facilitated discussion amongst staff, Matt and I, and some other key community players.
Go ahead, Christy. You always got like 6 of them.
I only have one. So this past week, I was in a meeting with Julian Sear and Rep. Fernandez, Dylan Fernandez, and they spoke about the wastewater protection fund and that the Vineyard and Nantucket are the only 2 of the Cape and Islands that haven't entered. And I know that we were waiting for a little bit, but I just kind of wanted to put it on our radar that we could maybe start a work group or something to compare the WIF and the wastewater protection fund and kind of see if we wanted to move forward, what that would look like, and just kind of wanted to get it on everybody's radar.
A couple things, I guess. You mentioned, we have a dog thing tomorrow. I think we also should be thinking, we've had the issues out with Scott White's property, and we all said, geez, we're going to think about, are there any changes that we need to do with dogs? That should be happen sooner rather than later. Even if it's strictly enforcing the leash laws, not allowing on the beaches at all in the summer like we used to, we really need to talk about it because that led to a lot of issues last summer. So I just wanted to just put that out as a reminder to all of us, and hopefully it'll get scheduled. Comments on Clarendon Street last week. It's a 16,000 square foot property. I wish there had been 2 units on that. It would be entirely appropriate. There's 2 units on both lots across the street from it, and 2 units on one lot, one down. It's we did what we did, and it's fine. But I think the need for housing is extreme, and we need to be maximizing every opportunity we get. I was away.
I don't think that has the septic capacity.
Well, the neighbors all do.
No, because it's pre-existing.
Well, we'll find out. Regardless, I could be wrong. That's fine. I just making the comment because I don't want something that's we decided 2 or 3 years ago when we didn't know what we know now to drive the situation. If you guys I looked at the tape and I don't think it was sort of discussed, but not really. I just think sometimes we make, we know more. We know different information than we knew when we did it 2 or 3 years ago, and so and then there's the issue. I think the money should be going to Affordable Housing Trust Fund to go into more housing in the future. I don't think we should be giving it to have it do other things, but that's different. We received a green community grant that came to us today. Designation. We are now a green community, which is great, and the town has been working really hard. Lauren has done a lot of work on it and deserves a lot of credit, as do the rest of the staff. There's a $139,000 grant application due by February 28th, which she'll be working on, and we should all be proud that happened. Let me see what my other comments. I spent a week in Telluride, Colorado. The kiosks that they have for paid parking are inobtrusive. They're black, this big, this tall. Everyone uses them, understands how to use them. And when you see that they're there, there's a lot fewer, a lot fewer signs and directions and everything else. People go to the kiosk. So we would be, if and when we get to that, we will be taking away a lot of the signs because the information's contained on those units. And I don't think HDC type people and preservationists should be that concerned because I think we lose a lot of different signs. It was about 30 years since I had been there. I went there last fall too, but it's been about 30 years. And the traffic was the same or less because of some of the changes they've made there. They've grown 4-fold, 5-fold, but they have kept some of that stuff in check. And the way they've done it is their zoning. They've put density into their towns and not allowed, some of the guys bought up a lot of the ranch land, but they didn't spread all the way down the road. And they added a gondola, which you guys have heard me talk about. And the gondola takes away 2 million car trips a year. So, sort of it's 2 million or 2 million people trips. And if we're going to ever get a handle on our sort of traffic problems and the issues that we have as we grow, we have to figure out what is that for us? How do we get people from the airport to the Mid-Island to downtown without a million cars? I mean, there has to be a way to do it. I don't know what it is, but I just think it's interesting to go other places and see how they've handled it. And they do have paid parking and all that other stuff. But it was eye-opening to me because I see where we've gone in 30 years and where they've gone, and I think we need to really focus on it a little more. It's part of our focus, but we need to keep at it. And I think that's it.
For next week's facilities discussion for strategic planning, there's a web page on the town site, facilities, that has all that on there. So you could just send us that link versus.
Yeah.
Okay. Just want to throw that out there. So you can go now. You can go check all that's there. We stopped talking about the hazardous waste, or we didn't ask questions about it. I didn't want to talk about it, but I knew it was a long meeting. The benefit of those waste summits, and at least the one that I went to, the way it was set up, was it really looked at the problem. We dug mostly into the problem versus just trying to figure out the solution. And I think we tend to just go into solutions too fast sometimes, just in life in general, definitely here on the board and in the town. So that's one thing that I thought after we got done talking about it that was very valuable around the history and the problem itself. I went to the census training last Friday in this room. It was very, very helpful. I'm not on the census count committee. I know a lot of people are. Christy, you're on it,
Yes.
I think. Just basic training on what happens if someone says, I don't speak English. How do I do this in another language? Like, what do you say? Where do you send somebody? We looked at, we had really good discussions on it's not just the non-English speaking part of our community or the undocumented immigrants it's very easy to stereotype that would be the hardest group of people to get in the census. What we found, and the next day I found out and some other people, but we talked about seasonal business owners, right? They've got staff here for 6 months. That counts to the census. And how do you get them to do that? And there's fear everywhere, from seasonal business owners to the immigrant population here. It's all over the board. Like, the census is just scary. And one unfortunate thing we found out is they're going to be walking around with badges, which is great, but that does not look like a friendly person to me, right? It's just such a simple thing to have bright green vest that say census on the back of it and a badge. Like, just basic things like that. And, follow the neon green hat. So I think there's a lot of challenges there, but the more that we can talk about it and the more that we can educate ourselves on it, I think the better. I mean, there's tens of millions of dollars at stake here over time. $50 million possible if we don't get it right. So I'm off my soapbox. I just wanted to.
And I think Martha Turk, who's the census coordinator for us, she's going to be on Town Talk either this Sunday or next Sunday to talk about the census. It might be this Sunday with Andrew Vorse. So next week. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.